I guess it's good afternoon, I think, or are we still, no, it's still good morning, still good morning. What a wonderful morning, and thank you so much for being here. Again, Pastor Ray, thank you so much for your support and your help. It has been truly a wonderful opportunity to visit and enjoy everyone here. So we're going to get started. We like to call this little event everything you wanted to know about transgender, non-binary, and intersex people, but were afraid to ask. So it's a great starting point. As was mentioned, my name is Julie Gray Owens, and that is my chosen and preferred name, and we're going to talk just a little bit about that as we go on. I am a transgender woman. When you talk to me or about me, I would ask that you use female pronouns, she, her, hers. I've been a community advocate now for over 16 years. I am the board chair and executive director of Gender Equality New York. We are a 501c3 New York State corporation. We are now able to accept contributions and things, although we're not ready yet. We just got our designation, so we're still putting everything together, but we feel really good about that. I am married to my lovely wife Barbara, who some of you have met, and I am a proud father of a 31-year-old daughter who works for Huntington Hospital as Director of Nutrition and Food Services, so I'm really proud of her. So, what I'd like to do now is introduce our panelists, and they're not in the perfect order, which is the way we like it. We always like a little bit of chaos. So I'm going to ask if you would just kind of make people aware of who you are. All right. So, my dear friend Barbara Salva.
That's me.
Barbara is a transgender woman.
Yes.
Her pronouns are she, her, hers. She is a Vietnam vet, U.S. Air Force, 4 years. Committee chair of the Long Island Transgender Day of Remembrance. And founding board member of Gender Equality New York. Barbara, thank you for your service.
Yeah, thank you.
Samantha Kutcher.
Hi.
Proud transgender woman. Pronouns she, her, hers. Transgender community advocate for over 6 years. Advocates for the LGBTQI community through the Live Out Loud organization. And facilitator for PFLAG Long Island Trans Parent Group. Charlie Arrowwood. Non-binary. Pronouns they, them, theirs. Parent of 2 toddlers.
They're not toddlers anymore.
That's right. Thank you very much. We have to update that. Oop, I just did something wrong. Hang on a second. I missed one. Attorney with Transcend Legal and Community Mobilization Coordinator with Pride for Youth. Thank you, Charlie. John Schindler, also known as Tess Miltoast. Gender fluid intergender person. Pronouns they, them, theirs. Gender fluid intersex activist and public speaker for 18 years. Co-chair of Intersex Friends and Family. Co-chair of organization Intersex International. Thank you, John. Alex Kehoe. Transgender male. Pronouns he, him, his. Student in the School of Social Welfare at Stony Brook University. Won this year's Undergraduate Student Employee of the Year Award at Stony Brook University and at the regional level. Congratulations, Alex. Maria O'Leary. Cisgender woman. Pronouns she, her, hers. Mom of 2 and passionate ally of a transgender teen. Retired financial services executive. Recreational runner. Happily married to an Ironman. Thank you, Marie. Sid Leroy. Non-binary, genderqueer, gender fluid. Pronouns they, them, theirs. Social worker and community organizer. Lives in, whoa, something bad just happened. Let's go back, come on. Okay, you got it? Woo, there we go. Thank you. All right, did that one. Lives in Patchogue with their partner, 2 friends, and 60 some odd plant babies. Currently rewatching every episode of ER in its 15-year season entirety, so wish them luck. One of my favorite shows. Very good, very good, very good. So I think we have done everyone, so we're safe now. Okay, great. So, a few business issues I think we've already gone over. Our email list is in the back to keep up with advocacy events, community issues, and requests for support. Please fill out a forum questionnaire. My wife Barbara will be doing it later on in the presentation so that we can continue to improve our forums. I will tell you, we just did a forum on Wednesday, and we had some comments about those questionnaires, and I modified the presentation again today. I'm constantly modifying it. So your input helps us make this better. There are also, as we mentioned, information sheets on transgender definitions and concepts, as well as a sheet on transgender discrimination. All right, now we're almost done. I have 2 important rules before we get started. My first rule is, if something is on a slide that's unclear, please stop and ask me for clarification. I am very linear in my thinking, and this presentation is very linear. So if you wait to ask a question about slide number 3, and maybe let's wait until slide number 43, you've just missed 40 slides, okay? So please stop me.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Can I bring my partner a coffee?
Sure. Yes. We're going to get into that. That worked out really well.
I guess that's your point.
Any other questions before we go on? Okay, great. So we want this to be an open forum, and we want you to feel comfortable about that. As a result, this is probably the most important question, important point. Do not be afraid of asking an improper or embarrassing question. The panelists and I have an agreement. While we're within these 4 walls, you can ask us questions, personal questions. If some of us feel shy, others of us will not feel shy. So we've now been, Barbara and I have been doing this, we've been more than around the block.
Oh, yeah.
So I think we've run out of people, like new questions. So there's not really anything that you're going to ask us that's going to be like, oh my God, I don't know what to say. You'll probably get an earful. But what's important is for you to understand that while you're here today, ask any question. When you step outside of these 4 walls, if you should meet a trans person or an intersex person or a non-binary person, be cautious in what you ask them. Keep in mind that they're not there for, information purposes out on the street. Today, that's one thing. Later on today, when they're out in the real world, or you meet them on the street in a week or 2 or a month or whatever, please be respectful and understand that some of those questions that you're going to ask here today, I hope, are not acceptable out in the real world. Okay, everybody got that? So here's the place to do it. Our mission is that you walk out those doors with no questions. Now that doesn't mean you won't get some questions tonight or tomorrow when you think about things, but we don't want you to leave here with any questions at all. So do we have that agreement? We're all good? All right, very good. So let's get started. Come on. Oh, there we go. Of course, it went too far. Come back with it. So, before we start talking about people like me, let's talk about people like you. Now, I don't know what's in everyone's heart in the room, and so I can't really, I'm going to talk in general terms. But statistically speaking, most of the people in the audience are what we call cisgender. And cisgender is a person whose personal identity matches the sex and gender designation given to them at birth. Everything starts, unfortunately or fortunately, in the delivery room. And so, as we all know, a baby pops out, someone yells, "It's a boy, it's a girl." And back in my day when I was born, they went to a clipboard probably and put a big M in one of those fields. And today I have to assume, because of the hospitals being more computerized and stuff, that probably someone goes to an iPad or computer of some type and types in an M or an F in most cases. So when we talk about that, we just want you to think about it a little bit. As I like to say, cisgender people, once they're born, they get on the river of life and they just float through with no problem because everything matches. Who they are, how they feel about themselves, how people relate to them, everything is perfect. There's never an issue about driver's license or which line to get in school or any of those things. It's just like you just move on, everything's very cool. So let's talk a little bit about the word cisgender. The prefix cis is from Latin, meaning on the same side. And some people will say to me, oh, that's not a real word. Well, it turns out that it's been in use since 1994. It became part of the Oxford English Dictionary in 2015 and the Merriam-Webster Dictionary in 2016. So indeed, it is a real word. And the important thing for you to note is that now that you are going to see this word, you're going to start noticing it all over the place. In medical journals, it's already being used. It's being used in legislation. It's being used now in many articles. If you listen sometimes to MSNBC, you're going to hear the term cisgender. And so what we're really talking about is people who are born and their designation that they're given for their gender matches them perfectly. And as I said, statistically speaking, we're probably talking about most of the people in the audience. So now let's talk a little bit about transgender people. Well, a transgender person is someone whose personal identity does not match the sex and gender assigned to them at birth. So for example, the day that I was born, someone marked an M, and it's been something that I've had to deal with all my life because that's not who I am. And for transgender people and non-binary people, we'll talk a little bit more about that, we, instead of being able to get on that river of life and being able to float on down, for us, we're swimming upstream. We're swimming upstream when we tell our parents that like 4 or 5 years old that, Dad and Mom, I just don't feel like a boy. Oh, no, that's not a problem. You're confused. When we get in line, when they say, okay, boys line up here, girls line up here at school, why are you in that line? Get out of that line. Get over in the line you belong in. When we try to use the bathrooms, it's a problem. When we try to get our driver's license, it's a problem. When we get our Social Security, it's a problem. Everything that we do is a problem, and we're constantly swimming upstream. So let's take a look at the word transgender. First of all, the prefix trans means across. So cis means on the same side, trans means across. Cis, same side gender, trans, across gender. And I'm going to use trans and transgender interchangeably. So I want you to feel comfortable. If I say trans, I mean transgender. If I say transgender, it's the same as trans. I'm just going to go back and forth. Please don't. Now, she said trans there, but she said transgender there. Is there a problem? No, it's the same thing, okay? Everybody good with that? All right. So when we talk about the term transgender, we're really talking about an umbrella term, which is used to describe a wide range of identities and life experiences, and they're all outside of gender expectations. And it refers to many types of people, including transsexuals, people who modify their body to match their gender, to cross-dressers, someone who, maybe lives their life as a man, and then on Friday night goes to a party dressed up as a woman, that type of thing. It also includes non-binary people, and what I like to use the term other gender-expansive people. And to me, that's even a bigger umbrella because we don't have to worry about defining what your issues are or problems are. Basically, we know we're all outside the gender expectations for our society and our culture. So when I introduced myself to you, I told you that I was a trans woman, and there's always a little bit of confusion. I've had people come up and go, now I know you're transgender and I know that you were born, male. Doesn't that make you a trans man? No, and this is why. The definition of a trans woman is someone who identifies as female and was assigned the sex of male at birth. Those fit me. I identify as female and I was assigned the sex of male at birth. And conversely, a trans boy or trans man identifies as male and was assigned the sex of female at birth. Everybody good so far? Just a little nod and good. Okay, great. So the first thing I'd like to concept I'd like to get across is this idea of gender conforming. Let's take a look at the two pictures there at the bottom. On the left, you can see a group of three people, obviously looking quite serious and planning to make some very serious decision, most likely where to find a good beer. On the right, you see a group of people, very supportive and clapping very nicely and very politely for something that had just occurred. And I like these pictures because to me, they tell a story of how we like to look at gender. We like to see what we're going to assume on the left are men who are determined and have important decisions to make and are, willing to go the extra mile. And we like to have our women calm, supportive, and, kind of motherly. We like that. Notice the difference in hairstyles. Notice the difference in dress. Where's that come from? Well, now let's talk a little bit about what we're really talking about when we talk about gender conforming. It's behavior and appearance that conforms to the social expectations of one's gender. We expect men to look like the picture on the left. We expect women to look like the picture on the right. Our culture classifies gender into two discrete categories, male and female, and that's known as what's called the gender binary. And we're going to talk a little bit more detail about that as we go on. But for many people, the gender binary dictates your occupations, your forms of dress, your public and private behavior, sexual orientation, your names, your pronouns, and your personality traits. And we see this all the time. I mean, only until recently did the Boy Scouts decide to have a division for Girl Scouts. But up to that point, there were no girls allowed in Boy Scouts. That's part of the gender binary. And we can talk about religions. I don't want to go into details, and I'm not going to suggest that it's right or wrong, but women cannot be priests. At least not in the Roman Catholic Church. Some of the other churches perhaps, but not in the Roman Catholic Church. Another form of gender conforming. And so I want you to just get an idea of gee whiz, yeah, culture kind of does determine what we expect from people. So now I'd like to talk about what some people call gender non-conforming, but what I like to term non-binary, okay? And non-binary, gender non-conforming, queer, gender fluid, they're all umbrella terms used to describe people who don't feel male or female, or who may have behaviors and appearances that don't conform to what we expect men and women to look like. They may feel they embody elements of both sexes, or perhaps are somewhere in between, or there's something completely different and don't identify with gender at all. The important thing to know is that non-binary people aren't confused about their gender identity. Non-binary identities have been recognized by cultures and societies around the world for centuries. Here in North America, many of the Indian cultures, before the white man came, had positions of responsibility and power within their little community for non-binary and transgender people. A lot of times they were thought of for the shaman's position or the medicine man or whatever the heck it happens to be, because they could see both worlds. So there was a place for all of us many, many years ago. However, things have changed since then. Some non-binary people choose to have surgery or take hormones to alter their body and help make them feel more comfortable. Others may be satisfied with their bodies the way they are. Being non-binary has nothing to do with sexual orientation. Non-binary people have the same range of preferences that all people have. And finally, there's no right way to be non-binary. You just are. So of all the slides I'm going to show you today, to me this is the most important slide for me to give to you to take home. We constantly hear religious leaders, government leaders talk about oh, those people and their lifestyle, or those people, they have a choice. They don't have to do that. Well, the reality is this. The American Medical Association, the American Psychological Association, and the American Psychiatric Association all define this condition as a disconnect between the gender assigned at birth and the gender role that the brain identifies with. Researchers are finding correlation between transgender people's brains and their gender identity. Last year, in the Netherlands, they did a study. And their research studies showed that transgender people's brains are wired like the gender that they identify as, not the gender that they are assigned at birth. Well, what does that mean? Well, here's what's happened. Using MRI scans, researchers found that participants who were trans women, like me, had similar brain structure and neurological patterns to cisgender females. Cisgender females? People who match their gender. And they found similar results when they assessed the brain activity of transgender men. Their neurological structure and patterns mirrored cisgender males. So when we say to you, this is who we are, we really mean it. And so, I've said to people, they'll say, like, well, I don't get this. Why are you like this? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't get it either. I don't understand it. But the best way that I can probably explain it is, I don't understand why birds at some point decide, you know what? Time to fly south. Like, how do they know that? They don't have calendars, it's like, so, but they know it's time, they know what their direction is, they know that they have to do this. And that's about as close as I can come to telling people why I am this way. It's not something I wanted, and I think most of us would say to you, look, we weren't looking to be this way, but this is who we are. And so when someone says, well, we don't like those kind of people, and you got to use this kind of bathroom, or you got to use this kind of locker room, all of that is denying the fact that whether we like it or not, biologically, this is who we are. So, believe it or not, every human being, each one of us in the audience and up here on the stage, can fit into 4 distinct categories in regard to sex, gender, and love. And we're going to use the genderbread person to help us with this process. So I hope everybody can see over here. Can you see the red thing? Can you see that? Okay. So there are 4 things that all of us can be measured by. I like to start with what we call the biological sex. That's our plumbing. Okay? When we talk about our gender identity, as we've just talked about from research, we're talking about the brain as part of the gender identity. When we talk about our gender expression, how we tell the world who we are, we're talking about the whole person that we see. And obviously, when we talk about who we can love, we're talking about sexual orientation, and that's coming from, if you will, the heart. And so we're going to talk about those 4 areas actually right now. So we started, as I mentioned, with biological sex. We know that that starts by someone looking at the physical sex characteristics of a baby, as I said, usually determined and assigned at the moment of birth. So I have a question for everyone. There's only 2 biological sexes, right? Yes? Everyone who thinks yes, raise your hand. Oh, there's some doubting Thomases out there. Everyone think there's more than 2, raise your hand. Everyone who thinks this is a bunch of baloney, raise your hand. Okay. All right. Well, smarty pants, you're right. There is no 2 sexes. There are intersex people. The term hermaphrodite, which most of us remember or learned, is a term that is not used on people. I had an opportunity to learn that the term hermaphrodite can be used for plants and can be used for animals, but it is not used for people. Intersex is the term we use. And when we talk about intersex people, what we're talking about is people born with biological sex characteristic variations. And that includes genitals, hormonal and chromosome patterns that do not fit typical binary notions of male or female bodies. Now, whether you believe in God, whether you believe in Mother Nature, whether you believe in the universe, whatever it is that you believe, the first step is everyone wants to have two boxes. There's a male box and a female box, and you got to fit in one of these two. Well, whether it's God, whether it's the universe, whether it's Mother Nature, it really doesn't matter. They're saying no, no, no. There's not two boxes. In fact, there's infinite. The term intersex is, again, an umbrella term, and it's used to describe a wide range of real and natural biological variation. In some cases, intersex traits are visible at birth, while in others, they're not apparent until puberty. And some chromosomal intersex variations may not be physically apparent at all. And unfortunately, intersex people may face stigmatization and discrimination once it's discovered that they're intersex. It's common practice to subject intersex children to unnecessary surgery to make their appearance conform to male or female stereotypes in order to alleviate parental distress, reduce gender identity confusion, and improve the potential for adult sexual relations. At least that's what the word is. The reality is that's not the case. These irreversible procedures can cause permanent infertility, pain, incontinence, loss of sexual sensation, and lifelong mental suffering. The procedures are usually done without the full, free, and informed consent of the person concerned, who's frequently too young to be a part of the decision-making. Usually they're babies. And after surgery, many adult intersex people feel that they were forced into sex and gender categories that don't fit them. So, we've talked about biological sex, that's our plumbing, that's the first category. Now we're going to talk about our second category, gender identity. And that's our deeply held, persistent internal sense of self as male, female, a blend of both, or neither. You know, sometimes I'll be out giving a talk or something, and usually there's some big burly cisgender guys that come over and go, so you look like that to get a man. And I go, well, not really. I'm not attracted to men. I'm attracted to women. But I'll go, so, but tell me, when did you decide to be a man? And they'll look at me like I'm insane. What do you mean? I've always known I was a man. And I go, exactly. That's your gender identity. And if that's true for you, why isn't it true for me? And usually it's, and walk away. We all know who we are. I'm going to use a little piece of what Barbara uses sometimes in her presentations. Imagine that you're on a deserted island, and there's no planes or trains or cars or airplanes or signs. It's just, you know, a little sand island with maybe one or two trees, and you're there by yourself. And worse, you have no clothing. Hopefully you're sitting on a leaf. At that moment, do you know who you are? Is there any question? I mean, there's no outside influence. Do you know who you are? Of course you do. Oh, I'm a 43-year-old man. I'm a, 28-year-old woman. I'm a this, I'm a that. You know who you are. That's your gender identity. It's how we know ourselves. Interestingly enough, the American Academy of Pediatrics believes that by the age of 4, most children have a stable sense of their gender identity. They know who they are. We all know who we are. And so when we hear this ridiculous stuff like, oh my God, keep any information about transgender people away from our children because they may turn trans. It doesn't work that way. We know who we are. You knew who you were at a very early age. That brings us to a term of gender dysphoria. It's a condition where a person experiences a persistent discomfort or distress because there's a mismatch between their biological sex and the gender identity. So when they look in the mirror, their brain goes, okay, I know what I want to see. Oh my God, I don't see that. And it can vary from person to person. Some of us, it is extremely serious. And it can create a lot of distress and have a negative impact on a person's quality of life. And as we talked about earlier, this gender dysphoria is resulting from a disconnect between the brain's internal map. The brain says, I should look like this, and the physical body, oh my God, I don't look like that. So imagine, if you will, for example, waking up one morning, going to bed as a man, let's say, and waking up, going to brush your teeth and looking in the mirror and seeing a woman. Would you feel a little dysphoric? Well, that's what people go through. Come on now. I'm pushing you. I'm frozen. There we go. Third category, gender expression. It's how we tell others our gender. And it's done by behaving and presenting. And it includes traits like clothing and accessories, hairstyle, makeup, the removal or growth of body hair, muscle development, how you stand, how you walk, how you talk. Now I have a question for you. You see that picture on the right there? Is there anyone in the room who's having a problem receiving a message from this person as to what gender they are? Anybody? Anybody confused? Could that be a man? Is that a woman? Anybody having a problem with that? It's clear that that person is sending a female message to you. Men can have long blonde hair, but they don't swoosh it like she's doing. And up to only a few years ago, men couldn't even wear purple. Right? I mean, I can remember when I went to business, back in the mid-'70s, if you wore like a purple or a lavender shirt to work, there was a good chance you were going to get beat up before you got home because you broke the rules. Okay? The other thing that I would suggest to you is that no man usually puts his hand on his hip. That's not usually what happens. So we tell people what our gender is when we walk outside and we go to the store. And of course things change. I can remember back, in the 60s, if you went to a grocery store, the moms were wearing dresses with high heel shoes, pushing their cart with a kid in the cart, maybe two for that matter. Now, I go to Stop and Shop, I see women in all beat up old sneakers, baggy, workout pants, a sweatshirt, ball cap, no makeup, no earrings. That's acceptable now. So it changes over time. But don't think that there's no rules right now. There are definitely rules. So our fourth category, we've talked about biological sex, one category, gender identity, two categories, gender expression, three categories, and our fourth category is sexual orientation. And gosh, we know a lot about this, I think, as a society now. It's who we're attracted to and who we can love. And it's the consistent physical, romantic, emotional, and spiritual attraction for others. And although there's no definitive answers as to why people have different orientations, researchers are finding genetic and biological differences, and again, guess where? In the brain, between heterosexual and homosexual people. So let's go back to our genderbread person. And you'll note, the important thing that I want to give you an idea on is, remember, we're not talking about boxes now. For example, let's take a look at biological sex right over there. And you can see that there is, female, male, and somewhere in the middle there is a whole group of people that are intersex. When we talk about your gender identity, we have the woman, the man, and they use genderqueer, use non-binary, whatever. You understand that there's a variation in there. When you talk about gender expression, you're talking about masculine, you're talking about feminine, and you're talking obviously in the middle of there being somewhat androgynous. And then of course when we talk about sexual orientation, We're talking about homosexual, we're talking about heterosexual. They use, what do they use here? They use bisexual. It could be polysexual, pansexual, it really doesn't matter. It just means that you're not just attracted to men or you're not just attracted to women. It could be anywhere. And as we all learn from plane geometry, a line is an infinite number of points, which means that each of us could be anywhere on those scales. And so the idea that we're trying to portray here, the idea that we're trying to get across to you is that, again, it is not a box and a box, it's a line, and you can be anywhere on those lines. Now I'll take the question.
Okay, so we're talking about gender identity. You had said earlier that, I think it was the pediatric academy studies show that by K-4, most children have a sense of where they are on that line.
Right.
In that study, do they find that people who are non-binary would say that they're not sure?
That's a good question. I'm not sure that they've really gotten that deep in
Can you
it.
repeat it for the video?
Repeat the
Sure.
question. You can use the mic.
Yeah, let's do that.
Repeat the question. I'll run with the mic. Sorry, we'll get it. Try that. Okay.
Testing, okay. Okay, so earlier they talked about gender identity and that children by the age of 4 have a pretty good idea of where they, identify on that scale, woman or man, My question was, do those who will later identify as non-binary in that study have an idea by age of 4 that they're not sure where they fit in?
And I don't have an answer for you on that one. I think it's a wonderful question. Charlie? That's why you have a panelist.
So I think that you are going to get as many answers as non-binary people you ask. I will say that for me, most of I was assigned female at birth. I'll talk more about my whole spiel later, but I was assigned female at birth, and I mostly hung out with boys, and I played on the boys' sports teams, and so as far as I was concerned, when I was very small, I might as well have been a little boy. And it wasn't until I started developing physically that I was like, wait, this is not supposed to be what's going on. And so, I joke with that study where they said that trans women have, brains similar to cis women, and trans men have brains similar to cis men. Do non-binary people just have TV static? What? I would be curious to see where my brain falls. Right? Wouldn't we all? Right? Right? You find out oh, I am trans. But I think that it's going to be different for everyone. I think that because of the different types of discomfort and dysphoria that people face, if someone has discomfort about their genitals, you have those from the time you're born, you might notice sooner when you're getting potty trained at school. If my chest was my biggest problem, and I didn't have that until I was 13. So I didn't really, there was nothing that was super gendering me. I wore basketball shorts all the time. No one put me in dresses, so it was not a problem, But I think that definitely it's going to vary, and I think that in part has to do with the type of discomfort that you feel, and how reinforced your societal expectations are at home by your parents, by your peers, by your teachers, that kind of thing.
Sid, you want to throw in anything there?
I really like this question, actually, because I'll go into this later about having kids and what the heck I'm going to do about that. But, yes, so for me, and I'm speaking for myself, and just like you said, it's a different answer for everybody. Gender felt largely performative for me, but I didn't really, recognize that when I was 4 years old. I just, I was being a girl, and you were, at that time, either a boy or a girl. That's what everybody told me. But even though my parents didn't tell me I couldn't do things because only boys did that, I didn't have, the language or, the concepts to be able to say, I'm somewhere in the middle until later. So I probably would have said, I'm a girl. But I wouldn't say that now.
Right. I'm not, go please.
So, I have a question for Charlie. I've known you for a few years now. Okay, so I've never seen your expression ever vary. If you are non-binary and gender expansive, and you have both sides in you, like we all do, how come you don't change your expression? I know I don't change my expression ever, because this is who I am. So how does that work for a gender non-binary person?
So even though my identity is not binary, it's very static, and my gender expression is very conforming. I am not ever surprised when someone sees me on the street and thinks I'm a man, even in settings like this. Most people assume I use he, him pronouns. I don't. I use they, them pronouns. Most people, people don't even realize that I'm trans. See, I'm gonna spend all my stuff that I was gonna talk about. But basically, when I decided to transition, I was transitioning away from female, not towards male. So I was never trying to be a man, or I didn't necessarily want people to read me as a man. I just didn't want them to read me as a woman, because that was what made me uncomfortable. So I feel like what I've put together kind of does that. But I don't consider myself gender expansive at all. I wear nail polish sometimes. I'm going to a wedding next week and I'm going to go get my nails done with my wife because it looks nice in my formal outfit. But otherwise, I think I have my identity is very static, and it always has been, even when my expression was a little more feminine. I grew up in the 5 towns. I went to bat mitzvahs every weekend, and I wore a dress to every single one of them. And that was a static expression. Then once I got older and was able to pick my own clothes, I was a little more, masculine. But my identity really it's not fluid. So gender fluid is not necessarily synonymous with non-binary. It is maybe a subset of that, but that's why I just use the bigger term, because the way I talk about my sexual orientation and my gender identity is that the wider labels that I use say more about what I'm not than what I am. So it's more important to me to broadcast that I am not cisgender and I am not heterosexual than it is to explain to everyone exactly where I am, if that makes sense.
Hopefully we didn't eat up all your...
I'm sure I'll think of others.
I'm sure you will too. And there'll be more discussion as we go on, but go ahead.
Just in general, non-binary people don't owe you androgyny. They don't owe you any sort of intermediate or fluid presentation, even if they have a fluid identity. You should just kind of believe what people say about themselves. And on that same token, trans women don't owe you a perfect vision of femininity, and trans men don't owe you a perfect vision of masculinity. They might do it for themselves, but in the end, it's, up to that person and up to what they want to do for themselves.
I think you did a wonderful job framing that, and I want to thank you for that. I would like to go back to our genderbread person, though, and realize that if your gender is whatever it is, you can go to another line for gender expression, and you can be anywhere on that line. So we shouldn't expect that, just because I'm in the middle of the top line, that I have to be in the middle of the second line, or in the middle of the third line, or in the middle of the fourth line. Okay? Each of those lines are a different place where each of us belong. Some of us are more masculine than others. Some of us are more feminine than others. It is what it is. Okay? So again, just getting you can go online and you can see a number of wonderful presentations of the genderbread person. We use this one because it's very, very simple. And we just want you to get the idea that all of us, if we had a report card for gender, would have different markings at different lines. Okay? None of us would have the same points all the way down the line. It's an infinite number. So we just want you to get that thought process as we go on. Everybody good with that? Any other questions? Otherwise, I'm going to roll on. Okay? Okay, good. All right. Let's see if I can get this to work. Yes. Okay, so after all is said and done, let's talk about some important concepts of what we hopefully have learned. Number one, gender is more than the biological tissue that you're born with. Not everyone's gender identity matches their reproductive organs. Sexual orientation is not based on biological sex or gender identity. Not everyone has clearly defined binary biological sex characteristics. Everybody good with that? All right, let's move on. So let's talk a little bit about gender transition. Gender transition is the experience by which a person goes from living and identifying as one gender to another. For young children, and for many adults for that matter, it starts out as a social transition. And each person's reason for transitioning are personal and unique. In many cases, a healthy gender transition may not include surgery or hormones. There are infinite ways to transition. It might include just coming out to your family, friends, coworkers, neighbors. It could include changing your name, your legal sex on your documents, your pronouns. It could also include binding, packing, tucking, electrolysis, hormones, and/or gender-confirming surgery. And there's no right way and no right time. Now, I'm hoping that you're looking at that slide. You got all the good information on the left, but I'm hoping you're looking at the slide and going, man, she really screwed up. Gender transition, that's a picture of the Long Island Railroad. Why would she do that? Well, I'd like to suggest to you that most people, most cisgender people, and most people in general, think of gender transition like a car wash. Oh, it's time to get the car wash. So we drive up to the front of the car wash, we enter into the car wash, it grabs our wheels, and then the car wash pulls us through, and we get, water sprayed, then soap, then maybe we get rubbed down, then we get another spray of water, then we get maybe like a wax job, then we get a blow dryer, and we come out, and we're all done, we're all clean, we're all finished. That's not a gender transition in the real world. A gender transition in the real world is much more like a trip to Montauk. Now, let's talk about that for a second. And I have to tell you, I had to add this slide because now we're doing a lot of work upstate. And when we started talking about Montauk, they were like, Montauk? Where's that? They barely know where Long Island is up there, so. But as we all know, Montauk is the furthest east you can go in New York State. You can't go any further. And so for this metaphor to work, we're going to suggest that Montauk, it represents the last step in your transition. There is nothing left to do. You get to Montauk, you have done everything. You have changed your body the way you want it. You've changed your name, you have your pronouns, you've done all your legal paperwork. You've told the world. Everybody knows that you are now this gender. Montauk is the last stop. Everybody good with that in this metaphor, this example? Okay. We all know that we start our trip over here in Penn Station, and that when we go down, we just flow right along all the way to Montauk. And you notice there's all kinds of stops all the way along the line. So let's all get on the train and head to Montauk, okay? So here we go, we're all on the train, and the train is running, and let's say our first stop is Jamaica. And here's what happens at Jamaica. In Jamaica, people are looking out the window, the people who are on the train, and some of the people on the train go, Jamaica looks kind of good. I think I'm going to get off this train and check out Jamaica. This looks really good for me. So a group of people get off the train. And some of the people that got off the train walk around going, wow, Jamaica, this is terrific. I love this place. You know what? I'm going to stay here. This is where I belong. And there are some people that got off at Jamaica and go, this is nice, but I still need to get to Montauk. And so what do? They get on the train to Montauk and continue on their journey. And so let's say, for example, that the second stop is, let's say, Freeport. And amazingly, the same thing happens. Some people are looking out the window, they see Freeport, and a group of people get off. And some of the people, again, same thing, some of the people walk around going, wow, Freeport, this is where I belong. This is me. And some people are like, yeah, Freeport was good. It was better than Jamaica, but I'm still not happy here. I need to go to Montauk. And they get back on the train to Montauk. And let's say that there's a third stop. Make it Massapequa. And the same thing happens. A group of people get off, and some people decide to love it and stay. Some people decide it's not enough. And some people go, you know what? I'd have been better at Freeport. And they take the train back to Freeport. So what happens is that while this train is heading towards Montauk, people are getting on, people are getting off, some people are heading backwards. But when we finally get to Montauk, the number of people who get off at Montauk is a very small number in comparison to the number of people that got on the train at Penn Station. And so when we have legislators, when we have public leaders, when we have religious leaders that say, okay, all right, we don't even like this idea that you're transgender, but the only way that you can use the ladies' room, use the locker room, get benefits, work for us, is you have to be in Montauk. You have to have everything done in order for us to give you rights. You have to have everything done in order for us to give you a job. You have to have everything done in order for us to put you in the right place at this homeless shelter. Well, that doesn't work, because it's only a small percentage of people that reach Montauk. Now, let's think about it for a second. Why doesn't everyone just go to Montauk? What's the big deal? Let's all get to Montauk. We don't even have to stop in Jamaica. We'll just all go to Montauk. Why is that? Let's think about that for a second. Well, let's talk about the most obvious thing. A trip to Montauk is mighty expensive. And as we're going to see in regard to transgender discrimination, most of our community members are either unemployed or underemployed. And so the ability for us to have money to be able to have that surgery and all the other things that go on with it, lawyer fees to change things and so forth, we don't have it. That's one. Number two, going through gender-confirming surgery, this is a serious operation. Some of our bodies can't take it, can't do it. And so that's a problem. How about our insurance plans? A lot of our insurance plans don't cover it. So the reality is, you can't afford it, you can't cover it, or maybe your body won't let you do it. How about, let's take something simple like a job. What if you're in sales or marketing? Sales and marketing guys, they're always out golfing. If you're taking female hormones and you're presenting as a man at work so that you're not discriminated against, what are you going to do about your breasts in a golf shirt? Slight problem. And let's talk about a different thing. Let's talk about your family, maybe someone you love. What if your partner says to you, I can deal with Jamaica, but if you go to Montauk, I can't be with you anymore. And that's a true story of many relationships. Or, you know what? I'm going to hold off going to Montauk until my children become adults. And then I will go to Montauk. So there's a whole host of reasons as to why everyone just doesn't get on the train express right to Montauk. But it's important for the general public to understand that gender transitions are serious and they're part of a life journey. We still are figuring out where we belong and where we have to get off. And for many of us, it's not going to be Montauk. And for some of us, that's painful because A, we would like to get to Montauk, but we don't have money or a job that will do it or insurance coverage and so forth. For some of us, we are happy where we're at. Or we're happy where we're at, but we might think about going to one more stop. It's up to us. It's our life journey. Is everybody good with that? Any questions? Anything at all? We're good? Yes. Hang on. I think there's another. Oh, there it is.
Is it okay to ask, where are you on the ride to Montauk, or is that a bad question?
In this room?
Yes, you may. I would probably put myself at about, Valley Stream.
No, I'm not. Actually, I'm not asking you. I'm asking outside the four walls.
No.
You do not ask.
No.
So
Let me ask a question. If you meet a gentleman on the street, hi, how are you? Are you circumcised?
I would love to answer that. No, that's interesting because I'm a member of a Bible Jam group here. And many times the questions arise in terms of how you live your life, that as a gay person, I need to tell that story. And it may be different from other people in the group. And I think that that's a good story to share. Now, not the first time I meet someone.
Right.
But I think telling the story can be life-affirming for everyone.
I'd like to say something, then I'm gonna hand it down. Right. And I want to tell you, I think it's a valid question, so please understand where we're coming from. The difference is that you decide to tell people about you. They didn't come and say, so, you a bottom or a top? They didn't ask you that. You tell what you want to tell. And if we're comfortable and we feel close enough to you, we may tell you some things. But it's our choice to tell you. That's my words. Move it on down.
It's pretty much what Julie said. When you go and talk to a new person on the street and he's a man, you say, are you gay? Or do you just chit-chat and talk about things of life? Similarly, for when I go out, I don't expect anybody to ask me, what kind of sex do I like to have? Who do I like to have sex with? That shouldn't be the first question on your mind. So it is offensive. However, once I got to know you and talk to you, I would be happy to tell you all about my life. It is a teaching moment, and I don't think anybody who's transgender should let those teaching moments pass, because every time you teach somebody, they learn something new. Hopefully you open a mind, but I take exception to anybody questioning my sexual identity as we meet in the street, a total stranger, even online.
When I go out this door, nobody knows that I'm trans. I don't advertise. I don't have a sign over my head. And at times, let me go back a little bit. What you had mentioned before about your Bible class or whatever organization that you're doing, that's very controlled. And that's okay there, because you're trying to teach somebody what's going on in your life. And that's a wonderful thing no matter who you are. And it doesn't necessarily have to be an LGBT thing. It could be anything because of your experience. This is why we're here. You can, just like you did, you can ask us anything in these four walls. When I go out that door, all bets are off. There may be a time I might meet you somewhere as a casual friend, and you get a little bit more of a controlled environment where you can speak a little bit more. You know, like anything else, you kind of let your life experience express to a new person. But other than that, it is totally disrespectful to ask a trans person or LGBT person. Just like Julie said, are you circumcised when you first meet somebody? Nobody says that. Why would you change that? If you can't ask a cisgender person those serious secrets or confidential aspects of their life, then don't ask me outside these walls. But that's why we're here now. If you got a question, because you've had a situation when you were outside, now is the time to say it, because we got lots of information to give you.
Another analogy I want to share is when my wife and I presented as a gay couple, and she was pregnant, people always used to ask us, how did you conceive? And that's the equivalent basically of walking up to a straight couple, a straight cisgender couple, and saying, what position did you use? And it's the same kind of thing, like those kind of questions in certain contexts with a certain group of people is one thing, but as kind of a baseline or just kind of, you don't know if it's going to be a threat to someone's safety depending on who hears the question. You just don't know enough, and not to mention, you 100%, you will not be the only person who has asked that person that question. And it gets exhausting. And the reason that I think most of us sit up here on these panels and do this all over the place is because we have the emotional bandwidth to do it on an ongoing basis. And when we don't, we pull back. But not everybody can expend the emotional labor of answering these questions everywhere they go. And so, it's awesome that everyone is here to hear these answers, you know, where they are, but I would say rather than asking specific people specific questions, encourage people to seek out resources like this, and there are a ton of websites that you can look at, which has caveats because not everything on the internet is great.
Or true.
Or true. Yeah. But there are reliable resources, and just kind of, it just doesn't, unless you are about to have a sexual encounter with someone, it really does not have any bearing on your interaction with them, what kind of genitals they have, or what other, you know, sorts of modifications or things that they've done to their body. It's medical information, really. And so the same way you would think about the confidentiality of any other medical information, it would be the same thing as this.
And as the parent of a trans teen, I can say as well, agree completely. I don't know what to say when someone asks me, is he going to have top surgery? Not my story to tell. Not my story to tell, number one. And number two, why do you care?
I don't even know why my mom cared about my own boobs.
Why do you care? You know, you wouldn't ask me, oh, you know, like if you met a daughter of mine, you wouldn't say, oh, C cup? You know, what? So, yeah, as a trans parent, I agree completely with my fellow panelists.
Good question, though.
Okay, well, we got the second. Any other questions? We're going to move on. All right, let's move on. Come on, there we go. So this is my transition slide. I don't know how many know of Matisyahu, actually Hebrew rapper. Interesting music, but what I really do is I love this quote. I think there's a tendency for people to get rigid and caught up in their beliefs of what is right and wrong, and they lose sight of humanity. Being human has to come first before right or wrong. So earlier, we talked about the gender binary. It's a classification of gender into two discrete categories with no other possibilities. Describes boundaries that discourage crossing or mixing gender roles. And any deviation from the gender binary often results in antagonistic attitudes, hate, prejudice, and mistreatment. I also want you to be aware of what we call heteronormativity. Now, a lot of people, when I say that, like, oh my God, what does that mean? Well, it's real simple. It breaks down to hetero is normal. It's the belief of two distinct complementary genders, man and woman. And our society supports behaviors and attitudes that are consistent with traditional gender roles, with heterosexuality as the norm. Our culture views heterosexual masculine men and heterosexual feminine women as normal, natural, and right. And any other gender or sexuality dynamics that are different than that are abnormal, inferior, and wrong. So let's take a quick look at this picture. I like this picture because I think this is a very heteronormativity type picture. Look at this. Look at the guy. Nice, strong, confident guy, kind of big, and looking kind of happy because he's got his little woman with him. And how's she look? Oh my God, she's in heaven. She's got this big, strong man to take care of her for the rest of her life. Right? If we were to modify this picture, it would send a different message. I guess my first question is, if we wanted to use that picture as a Coca-Cola ad, could we do that? Sure, right? Almost see that red can go spinning up. But what happens if that picture changes? Let me give you a college couple. Just imagine this college couple. The college couple, the female in the couple is a 6'4" women's basketball player. Beautiful woman, strong, the whole deal. And she's going with a law student. They're in college right now. And he's like 5'10", you know. And if you could imagine that picture with the where the white shirted person is, a female basketball player, and with the smaller person, that being the law student. If you could imagine that picture like that, is that a Coca-Cola ad? Yeah, and I agree with you, it's not. But now we're not even talking about gay people or trans people or non-binary people or we're just talking about two cisgender heterosexual people, and we know that that would not be a good Coke commercial. And so the reality is that we come with certain baggage. We've been taught certain things. Shorter men, taller women, something's wrong with that. A tall woman should have a taller man, right? That's what we want. And we certainly don't want that woman to be aggressive and strong. We would prefer her to be, a little more on the softer side. The guy should be the big, strong man, right? That's what we want. Well, that's the problem. And what ends up happening is those beliefs turn into something that's not very nice. So as I say here, you see the effects of gender rules in the picture. Come on, I'm not getting it. There we go. And we modified the picture, and we know that that doesn't work. It doesn't send the same message. There we go. So when you take the gender binary and you take heteronormativity, what you end up with is called transphobia. And transphobia is the mix of cultural and personal beliefs that produces hostility, fear, discomfort, and distrust. Whoop. Thank you. Directed towards those who don't conform to society's gender expectations. Transphobia can be found in policies, laws, social and economic arrangements that discriminate against transgender people. Transphobia can also be internalized when trans people feel self-hate, shame, embarrassment, and inferiority. And obviously those feelings cause low self-esteem, depression, and the thought of being unable to be loved. So I'm sure that not everyone realizes this, but there is something called the U.S. Transgender Survey. It was done by the National Center for Transgender Equality. They did their first one in 2010, and they did a second one in 2015. We're going to talk a little bit about that. They're going to be doing another one next year in 2020, and so we'll be able to measure how things are changing from 2010 to 2015 to 2020. When this survey was done, it is the largest survey ever done to examine the life experiences of transgender people in the United States. Just under 28,000 people were respondents, and they came from all 50 states and U.S. territories and so forth. So we're not talking about 8 people in a conference room. We're talking about a sizable, significant survey. Here's the results of what they found. 29% of the respondents were living in poverty, 2 times the national average. 30% had been fired, denied a promotion, or mistreated on the job. 15% reported being verbally harassed or physically attacked on the job. 15% were unemployed. At the time, that was 3 times the national average. And for transgender people of color, their employment rate was 20%, which is 4 times the national average at that time. 16% reported owning a home. I would go, yay! Except the problem is that the national average for Americans is 63% of Americans own a home. Trans people, only 16. 30% reported being homeless at one time in their life. 70% of those using a homeless shelter reported mistreatment. 50% of undocumented trans people reported being physically attacked. Not only are they undocumented, so we want to beat up on them for that, but then we find out that they're trans and let's really go to town. And with numbers like these, is it any wonder that 40% of the respondents had attempted suicide. That means out of 10 people, 4 people tried to kill themselves. There's further economic issues that we need to talk about. Trans people are faced with social disparities that are barriers to taking care of their health, specifically unemployment, food insecurity, trauma, and unstable housing. The community also experiences higher rates of drug and alcohol abuse, sex work, violence, and those are key contributors to HIV/AIDS. Trans people have higher rates of depression and anxiety. And these problems are worse for those who do not have adequate social support or who are unable to express their gender openly. Barbara and I have done a lot of work upstate. When we go upstate and we see the conditions that those people are in, because our state, when you go upstate, I don't know how many people have been up there, it's a lot like Ohio. Okay? Parts of Kentucky. You know, it's not what we think it is. It's not the blue land. So we're going to kind of wrap up here, but we want to talk a little bit about how to interact with what we call gender-expansive people. First of all, accept the person's assertion of their identity. You don't have to understand it to respect it. Use language and behavior that's appropriate to the person's gender identity. Address the person by their chosen or preferred name. I will tell you, when we choose a name, it's part of the trip to Montauk. And every time someone uses our chosen name, it's like, yeah, that's me. You're right. That's me. Julie, yeah, that's me. It has a major impact on us. Use pronouns that the person prefers. And if you don't know what pronouns to use, you know what you should do? Ask. Usually cisgender people are like, oh, no, I don't want to ask because they'll think that like they're not presenting enough that I should get the right message, and I'm so embarrassed, and what if they get angry at me? I will tell you that now we've been doing this again for a while. And I have not run into a trans person yet that has told me, oh, no, I don't want them asking my pronouns because I'm embarrassed. Just the opposite. Our community members say, when you ask us, you show respect. When you ask us, you look to communicate with us. You look to, really get serious about who we are and want to know us. And so please, if you have a question, just ask. Now, I would suggest to you one other thing, though. What would happen if, even here at this church, emails that went back and forth had a person, at the end, hi, dear, blah, 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 this is what we want to talk about, hope to see you soon, your name, and under your name, you put your pronouns. And what happens if everybody in this church did that? It would become a normal thing. Now, I know I've been in a lot of churches, and they usually have like little name badges. Hi, I'm Julie. Well, my name badge, and yours too, should be Julie, she, her, hers. Or he, him, his. Or they, them, theirs. If we make it a regular thing, if everybody just gets used to like, yeah, pronouns, no big deal, then we could ask cisgender people, hey, what's your pronoun? Just to make sure, So let's think about that. Now I see a question right there, and I know you are.
Really more of a comment. I feel like definitely, especially when dealing with non-binary people who might be sometimes pretty invisible in terms of, when you see them, when you see their presentation, the onus is really, should be on cisgender people to put their pronouns first, because it can feel awfully alienating to put some sort of different pronoun on a name badge rather than be the, last person after everybody else already puts their pronouns. So it's definitely, onus should be on cisgender people and, people who have a very consistent and obvious presentation, people whose pronouns wouldn't be questioned to do this first.
Thank you. That's an amazing comment and right on target. I would suggest to you that if you really want to be open and affirming, that pronouns on everyone's name tag should be standard process, because that tells us as community members we're welcome here.
So if I saw you on the street, especially since everybody looks at everybody's outward expression, so if I called you he, would you be upset if you're non-binary and you'd rather be using they or theirs?
That varies on the non-binary person quite a lot. I'm pretty used to it, but I certainly have a preference.
Okay, so a lot of trans people go stealth. Stealth means that they don't want anybody to know what their gender is. So they don't want you to know whether they're what they are, and they'll go just as she, her, and hers, but they don't go outwardly to tell you they're that passable. For me, I don't care. I don't go out in the world trying to fool anybody as to thinking that I'm different or I want to be only known as a woman. I just want to be left alone and go about my business and be happy. That was my intention when I first started my journey, that I want to be part of the cisgender society. So pronouns mean nothing to me. A nice, peaceful life means extremely much to me. So, but it gets confusing, and I think it's what Julie says is very important when you have non-binary, gender-expansive people that don't want to be called the pronouns by their expression. That's what I was trying to bring out when I asked Charlie that question. It becomes very difficult because we all look at somebody and make a snap judgment. These snap judgments are stereotypes.
Well, the question is, should we be doing that? And
I think that's a deeper question that could be an entire thing on its own. But so I think, especially for non-binary people or people who don't use binary pronouns, if you're making an assessment based on what you see, that's fine. It's a matter of if they then tell you otherwise, respecting that. So I absolutely do not begrudge anyone who sees me on the street and uses he, calls me father, whatever, just because I don't use those terms myself, if they know better, if I've corrected someone multiple times, or I can tell that they are intentionally, not being respectful and not using the words that I've asked them to use, that is a completely different scenario than...
Without a doubt.
Right, that's a completely different situation than someone seeing me on the street and assuming I'm a guy, and I do a lot of picking my battles. So if I'm interacting with someone I'm never going to see again, I probably am not going to correct them because this interaction is almost over. If it's someone kind of that I'm engaging with on a continuing basis and it's not a safety risk for me to out myself, I mean, everybody knows it's my job is to talk about this stuff. So I don't often, and especially because I appear to be a white man, I have very little risk compared to other populations having these conversations. But I think it's definitely a situation by situation thing, and there's definitely a difference between I would like you to use this word for me, and then you saying, I'm not going to do that because that's not what I see.
I was also going to say too, I know for me, since we do tend to make assumptions based on the way people express themselves, sometimes you can't go wrong with using a gender neutral pronoun as opposed to just misgendering somebody. For me, if somebody can't tell by looking at me that I use he, him pronouns, I'd rather them refer to me with gender neutral pronouns than misgender me altogether and use she, her. So that's just for me, and I kind of try to promote that when I'm out, and if I can't tell how somebody identifies, or if they don't tell me, because you don't really know how somebody identifies unless they tell you. So I've found that you can't really go wrong with gender neutral pronouns, and then if somebody else tells you, no, you can call me he, him, or she, hers, or something binary, then that now you know for the future. But at least you didn't misgender them altogether using a binary pronoun.
Any further questions? All right, I'm going to move on one more. We've talked about this a couple times. Be careful and considerate about what questions you ask. Off-limit questions include their birth name, where they're at in their transition, and anything related to their sexuality. Okay? Kind of beat that one up. All right. Now we're going to do a very quick pronoun primer. She, her, hers, he, him, his are gender-specific pronouns. Non-binary and gender non-conforming people may wish to avoid these labels and want to be referred to by using the gender-neutral pronouns they, them, theirs. Final questions for me. Awesome.
I would just also add,
Wait. Coming over.
I would also add that there are other newer pronouns that are developing that people are choosing for themselves that are not any of those three. And if someone uses those pronouns, they will explain to you how to use them. But I don't know, like Z, Zim, and Zer, or
I actually cut that out so that we
Intent.
can go
I
through
just
it
made-
intentionally.
So I just wanted to make one comment in terms of the normalization of pronoun usage. I happen to know somebody who works for Target, so hot off the presses, Target is now putting on all of their associates' name badges, their preferred pronouns. And that's, I think, 350,000 people globally that work for the company Target. So, progress.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll go, and then we'll take the question.
Everything you've learned today is a lot of information. The bottom line is, there's not a trans person, intersex person, binary person in the world that doesn't just want plain respect. No different than you. We are no different than you. We're just people trying to get along, pay the bills, raise a family, whatever. So when it comes to pronouns, I don't go to everybody and say, well, you know, she, her, hers. No. We just do what you do. I get a lot of doors open for me. I get a lot of yes ma'am, no ma'am. It's a wonderful thing, because this is really who I am. But if they do misgender me, I'm not going to go crazy over it. Especially like Charlie said, if it's a very short-lived relationship, who cares? We just want respect, period. Whether it's in this church or outside this door, we are no different than you are. We have baggage because of our transgender status, so to speak. But that's our problem. All we need from you is just to say, hi, how are you? Or just to smile. We're just like anybody else. So, if there's a bottom line after all this is said and done, respect. Totally, just like you'd give anybody else.
Can we have a round of applause for Julie and her presentation? And there's just one thing I want to throw out, then I'm going to sit down again. But all the things that you all are talking about for us and for yourselves and for us to hear, we're talking about removing barriers and obstacles to living a life, as you said, you just want to live your life. And when we're living our lives in ways that are genuine and authentic and are not presented with these obstacles, we have a much better life together, and there's more gifts and more ways about who we are that are shared easily that I think is so needed. So the work or the practice, as my friend likes to say, of learning better how to engage and be with one another, the gifts are much greater than I think anything we could imagine today. And that's as wonderful as all we can think about at this moment. So thank you for that. End.
Okay. All right, we're going to get started.
Stand up.
Anything you want. You can sit, you can stand, it's your choice.
Okay. So my name's Alex. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm a transgender male. And I'm going to talk a little bit about my journey of discovering who I am. So growing up, ever since I was like 3, I always knew that I felt comfortable as a tomboy. I was the most comfortable when I was expressing my masculinity. I have an older brother. He's 4 years older than me. And everything he did, I wanted to be just like him. I was hanging out with all the guys. I was playing all the guys' sports. I was cutting my hair like my brother, I was wearing his clothes, and that's just how I felt comfortable. And a lot of people in my life thought that that was just a phase, and that I was just a tomboy girl, and I was gonna grow out of it. And then I hit middle school, and I felt the pressures to conform to society's expectations of what a cisgender woman should act like, be like, dress like. And so even though I knew I was comfortable as a tomboy and I was comfortable being masculine, I felt like I had to suppress that in order to fit in. And so I went through middle school expressing femininity because I felt like that was the right thing to do. I felt like I had to do that. And then I got to high school and I just felt so uncomfortable with who I was. And I thought it was because I was attracted to women. And being that I identified as a woman, I was like, okay, like maybe if I come out as gay, I'll feel more comfortable with who I am, and then that'll be like my only coming out story, that's it, hooray. And so I came out as gay in high school my sophomore year, and I dated a girl, and I felt a little more comfortable with who I was, but something still wasn't right. And it wasn't until I got to college and I got into another relationship, and it happened to be a very unhealthy and toxic relationship, when I started realizing that there was a huge disconnect between the body I was born with and how I felt I was on the inside. And I wasn't really sure where it was coming from, because I was taught that, you know, if you're born a biological female, then you must be a cisgender woman, and you should feel comfortable with that, and that's how you'll go about your life. And that just wasn't the case for me. And I really just wanted to explore that. And so I would go to bed and I would, you know, look up on Reddit and look up on the internet, you know, how do you know if you're trans? And I would obsess over transgender YouTubers who were documenting their transition. And all while I was doing that, I was in the back of my head saying, you know, this can't be me. Like, you know, I'll get over this feeling of being uncomfortable. You know, I'll learn to just live with this. And I thought I could suppress this part of me. And it wasn't until I started bringing up, like, to my partner at the time, you know, what would you do if I changed my name? Or what would you do if I got top surgery? And it was always shot down, because I was dating a girl and her response was, you know, I love you because you're a girl and I don't want you to change a thing about you. And because the relationship was so unhealthy and it was so toxic, I felt like if I were to transition at that point in my life, I would be alone and I wouldn't find anybody that was going to love me through it. And so I tried my best to suppress all of these feelings of being uncomfortable, these feelings of disconnect, this feeling of not knowing who I was. And I finally, after 2.5 years, I got out of that relationship. And my junior year of college, I met my girlfriend Jess, sitting over there. And I was finally able to be in a safe environment to explore these feelings of, you know, not knowing my identity. And so, you know, after being very open with Jess about it and being like, you know, I don't feel like I'm a cisgender woman. I'm not identifying with that identity at all. And so in January of this year, I came out as non-binary. And for me, I felt like, you know, maybe this is my last stop on the train. Like maybe this is going to be it. But in the bottom, like at the bottom of my heart, I knew that I was supposed to be born a male. I just was so confused, and I just felt like, you know, maybe I'll just be comfortable at non-binary and that'll be it for me. And so I came out as non-binary. I was going to school and people were referring to me using they, them pronouns, and I had like a nickname of my dead name, so it was more comfortable for me. But as time went on, like a few months went by and I still felt really uncomfortable. I still felt like I was being misgendered. I still felt like that wasn't me. And it became so hard to suppress my identity and suppress the fact that I was trans. And I just felt like there was a constant weight on my shoulders. And in March of this year, when I was still going to school as non-binary and everybody still knew me as non-binary, I came out to Jess as trans. And I sat her down and I was like, listen, I'm pretty sure you know, but I just want to tell you that I'm definitely trans. And we started experimenting with masculine names, and she started using masculine pronouns for me. And so finally I had like a safe space where I could be myself. But I was still going to school and I was still going to the outside world, and I was living life as non-binary, and that felt very just difficult for me because I felt like I wasn't being true to myself. I felt like I wasn't living as the most authentic version of myself. And so after that point in time, I came out to my family. I sat them down and I said, listen, like I'm trans, I'm Alex. I want to use he, him pronouns with everybody when I'm at home. And so that helped me get to the point where I am today. And it still was difficult because even though I was coming out to all these people, behind closed doors, I was still going out and not being that. And so there came a point where I was like, okay, I have to take this weight off of my shoulders. I can't carry this by myself anymore. And so the semester ended in May, and on May 10th, I think it was, the semester ended, and I had a whole Facebook post written out, and I was like, okay, today's the day. I need to come out, and I need to tell the world who I am. And so I posted it, and I can't even tell you the feeling of euphoria that came over me after I, told everybody that I was Alex Ryan Kehoe. And it was the most liberating feeling to this day that I've ever felt in my life. And from then on, I was able to take steps in my transition to feel comfortable in my own skin because I was experiencing a lot of gender dysphoria that I was hiding, that I was pushing aside. And I knew that I needed to confront that because I needed to take care of my mental health. And so I set up getting hormone replacement therapy. I'm almost 4 months on testosterone. I set up getting top surgery. I'm actually leaving in a week to go get top surgery in Florida. And I changed my legal documents with the help of Charlie, actually. Charlie helped me change all my documents. And, I couldn't have done it without you. And honestly, I've never felt like more myself. I'm living every day as the most authentic version of who I am. And I'm really hoping that by sharing my story and by being open and spreading awareness and helping us be visible, because being trans is not easy. And if you're facing a lot of other isms, if you're trans and you're a person of color, if you're trans and you're poor, there's just a lot of factors that go into it, and you can be at such a disadvantage. Even being trans is a disadvantage, but if you don't have the resources to transition, if you don't have the resources to be who you are, it can be very difficult living life as yourself. And so I hope that by sharing my story, I can just make this world a better, more accepting, and more comfortable place for people like me. So thank you.
So I guess I'm up. I'm not going to bore you with my story. I'll give you a timeline, but you're going to hear the same story over and over again by everybody who's trans. Whether you're in the audience or not, you've heard this story a million times. We come from the same seed. The timeline is different. I was 8 years old when I had that aha moment. I'm now 68. I knew there was something different about me, but back in the 50s, you couldn't do much about it. And fear is what governed my life for over 40 years, and then some. I'm a pharmacist by profession. I got married, did everything the right way, had 2 children, been married for 45 years. That's not to say anything about my sexual identity. We have a very different type of marriage at this point, but that's not important. What governs our bodies mostly throughout our transition and coming out is fear. Fear of acceptance, fear of retribution, fear of disappointing our parents. It becomes so overwhelming at times that you're afraid to take that first step out. However, in 1999, when I noticed there was something called an internet, when I was younger, I noticed that there was another person on this planet that was just like me, that knew that I wasn't just a cross-dresser or a transvestite, but something different. Something was wrong inside that didn't match. I don't know how many of you know Jazz Jennings or have ever seen her show on TV. So she often says, I have a girl's brain, but a boy's body. That's how it really much is for me. It didn't match up. I would cry every night, wishing that next morning I'd wake up with the proper genitalia, but that never happened. There's a number of us on the panel that, as Julie said, have taken that train from Penn Station to Montauk. All of us are on different stops. It doesn't matter where we are. It's the fact that we're comfortable and happy with who we are. That's the whole point about being transgender. You have to reach a point finally where this is all I want to be. It's not that we're judging anybody whether they want to express themselves as I do or as anybody does. It's wherever you're happy in life, and that goes for everybody, not only trans, but cisgender people too. You have to personally be happy with yourself. I'm at peace with myself. I'm happy that I can go out. I never ever thought I'd be able to do these things. I travel from north to south, west, and if I get ma'amed, which I do a lot down south because they're very respectful down there, it's a bonus. But I don't go out, like I said, trying to fool somebody. The story that I want to tell is that I was out to have lunch with my brother a few months ago, which I haven't spoken or seen him for 2 years. We had lunch. I ordered my unsweetened iced tea. He ordered his soda, things like that. He took his shots at me about my transition for a change. And when the waitress came back, she said, "Would you like something else to drink?" And I said, "Yeah, but can you put some alcohol in this next drink that I order?" And she asked my brother, and she said to him, "Would you like another Coca-Cola?" She said, "You know what? I'll have another Coke. I haven't seen my brother in 2 years." So with that, I look at the waitress and I say, "Now you know why I need the alcohol." And you know, it's like I said, I have never corrected anybody except for just once. And like Charlie said, if you're being vindictive or the reason for your misgendering me was purely out of hate or whatever the reason may be, then I'll get back on my haunches. But I'm on the phone a lot, especially in a pharmacy, and you get misgendered constantly. So it's very easy for me to be Samantha, and they ask who they're talking to, I just say Sam. There was one representative from an insurance company I was speaking to get a prescription passed for a patient, and she must have been having a bad day. And so was I, but you know, everybody's got to do their job, right? So she said, "Okay, sir." I said, "Well, it's ma'am, and let's go further. I understand you're having a bad day, so am I, but let's get this prescription filled for this person. Don't make any assumptions about who you're speaking to." I could have been a lifelong smoker, which I'm not. Anyhow, so, you know, the fear is overwhelming at times. It keeps you from continuing to be your authentic self. Like Alex said, I know when I had told the first person that I was trans, and that was my wife, the amount of weight that comes off your shoulder is monumental. It's as if just think about if you can carry a secret for 40 or however many years you can, and all of a sudden you're able to get rid of that bad secret, how much that weight comes off your shoulders. The disappointment that we have, that we think we're going to disappoint our parents is tremendous. I work with a lot of children, and all of them will say the same thing. They'll try to come out as gay first, just to lessen the blow. And 6 months later, when they come home from school, from the second semester at college usually, they'll give the second part of that secret to their parents. And that's when you feel the weight. Because honestly, if parents don't support you, you have a long road to go. Unfortunately for me, which was my choice, my parents never knew about this. I don't think anyhow. And I'm sorry to say that I wasn't able to tell them. But because of the fear that I experienced, I wasn't going to. It took me a long time to gain respect of myself, love of myself, to finally come out to everybody in my life. Those are important to me. It was important for me to tell. Those that are not, you know, I like just walking up to an old person that I knew and just telling them who I am. I like to see the visceral expression on their face, because that says a lot about a person. If you can be accepting and loving, then that person is going to go further in their transition. Wherever you feel like landing in life, that's fine with me. I don't judge, I don't care. Unfortunately, society judges. And, you know, I'm trying to live in your world as well as I'm asking you to live in my world. We have to meet in the middle sometime and try and somehow work this life through. That'll make it easier for both. You may not accept me, but understand me and be respectful of us. That's all I ask. So, that's it.
Thank you, Samantha.
John, would you rather sit or are you okay?
I'll be okay. Hi. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between. That would be me. I'm intersex. I'm in between. So, let's see. My story is very long, so I'm going to try to truncate it quite a bit. Because we have a lot of people to get through on this panel. So, let's see. I was born without a pituitary gland and undescended testes, and I basically was raised male, but I never felt like a boy or a girl. I got along better with women than men, but I tended to, always feel like I was somewhere else. For me, I'm non-binary. I'm as comfortable in a dress as I am in a suit and tie, and which is I'm not ever comfortable. But anyway, I am used to sometimes going in a suit and tie to a restaurant with my parents, and still, no matter how much facial hair growth I have, they'll still call me, and what would you like, miss? Or, and ma'am, how would you, like to order? So I don't even bother to, correct people like that. I just, let it slide. If they figure it out, they figure it out. But I've had, let's see, I'm one of the first recipients of human growth hormone, okay? And you wouldn't know that by the way I look, but let's see, one of the things that gives it away is I'm 52, okay? And I feel like a teenager, and probably dress like one too, but anyway, for a good part of my life, I was a little person, okay? I was always in the lowest 10th percentile of my height for my age, so I often got misread as female growing up, and when you're told as a young person, oh, you have to correct people, after a while you're just like, I'm exhausted. I have to correct people all the time then, but as I understood better about myself. I've had 4 coming outs, okay? My body doesn't produce any male or female hormones, okay? And I'm actually allergic to the secondary sex hormones. So, even though I was on testosterone for a short time, I can't do it anymore. And so what you see is what you get, I guess. Now, I've been doing talks like this for 18 years, and it never gets any easier, but I just, get through it. And essentially, I was asexual in high school and junior college. I came out as gay after taking testosterone in 20. From the gay community, I met the drag community. From the drag community, I met the trans community. And I started to think that I was trans for a very long time because a lot of the original articles I read about intersex only talked about chromosomal or genital issues and never talked about hormonal issues. And at the time, I only knew of my hormonal intersex issue. I didn't know until I was in my early 40s that what I thought was a hernia operation was actually something else. It turned out that the hernia was caused by undescended testes. So for a long time, I just thought that I have something in common with the intersex community, but I don't know if I really qualify as them. And then, later on, it made more sense that I made the right community choice, I guess, or found my people. So let's see. What else do you want to say about this? I guess I'm gonna try to just like end it there real quick, and if people have questions, come up and talk to me. I'll be around for a bit. Okay?
I know we created this norm of standing, but I'm going to sit. I have some notes, and it's just easier that way. So as Julie said, my name is Sid Leroy. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. And before I go into my story, I just want to like preface this with like, most, if not all, media depictions of trans folks and the trans community is centered around their gender identity stories or coming out stories. And we're so multifaceted and have so many stories. We have friends, we have parents, we have kids, we have careers, we have hobbies. And in this context, it makes sense, we're talking about like our gender stories, but because the media only portrays those stories, I just wanted to remind everybody that we have many different things going on in our lives. So with that said, here's my gender story. I want to kind of give an analogy from my own experience. In middle school, I was really interested in hip hop, and I loved to go dancing with my friends whenever we had dances. Dancing felt so good to me, and I took dance classes for 9 years, so hip hop lent itself to that. And then as I got a little bit older, 14, 15, I started listening to punk rock, and I thought that was really cool. I love the rebellious nature of punk and the scene and the style, and the people were loud and whatever. But in my middle school, the two cultures and groups were dichotomized. So you listened to hip hop and you were part of that group, or you listened to punk and you were part of that group, and there was no kind of crossover there. And so I was really torn. I really liked hip hop. I really liked dancing to hip hop, but I also really liked the punk scene and going to shows and all that kind of thing. And I would kind of think about this every day. I need to pick. I can't choose both of them. Nobody else is doing that. I have to pick a group or whatever. And until one day I was what, actually I don't. I like both. I'm just going to listen to both. What's going to happen? You're going to kick me out of the school? That's not going to happen. So I listened to both. And it's not a perfect analogy, but my gender is very similar in that I never really felt like a girl or a woman, but I definitely didn't feel like a man, so I kind of existed in this weird gray area, and it wasn't until I was an adult that I was able to find the language to talk about my experience that way. But when I was a kid, growing up out here in Suffolk County, I knew I was different in some way, and the kids definitely thought I was different in some way, and they'd call me weird. That was the word they would use to describe me, which at the time I resented, and now I'm hell yeah, I'm weird. So I needed to get away, so I moved away when I was 20 years old. I found other folks who identified similar to me, had similar stories. The internet helped me find a community through Tumblr, and people were describing themselves as genderqueer, and I was wow, your story is really similar to mine, and that's really cool. So I came out in my 20s, I'm in my 30s now, and so I found my identity, I found my community, I decided to come back to Long Island, and I had gotten my MSW, so it's a social work degree, and was doing community organizing. I wanted to do that out here because I don't want people to feel like they're stuck in a place where they don't have the room to thrive, where they feel like they need to leave, or that they are stuck in that place. I hear a lot of people say that they're stuck here, that when they leave, they're escaping Long Island. And so I moved back here with my partner who brought me my coffee earlier. Thank you. And we are thinking about having kids in a couple years. And I'm thinking preemptively, I'm a planner, so I'm thinking way ahead. What am I going to do for my kids to make sure that they have the environment in which they can explore their gender without judgment, but then also be able to be safe and survive through middle school and high school as best as they can. And I wanted to end this with questions because I don't know everything yet, probably never will, but Charlie, maybe we can talk about it later. Yeah, thank you.
I'm not going to stand up either. And yes, I have a lot of stiletto high heels, so that's why I'm not standing. First of all, I want to thank everybody for being here. This is a great moment for all of us. I'm probably the oldest one on this panel. In fact, I know I am. I have a long story. When I started out cross-dressing at 5 years old, I knew, that was just a joy thing. I think my mom thought that too. And that certainly continued all through high school. But I dated girls and I played sports and I was very active. I did get into the service. I joined the United States Air Force in 1963. And during that 4-year hitch, I wound up in Vietnam. Had an experience there greatly. That was an eye-opener. And when I come back, I went to college. I went to school. From my service days, I was extremely interested in aviation. I've been working on airplanes since I was 17, and I still do it now. When I got home, like I said, I went to school, and during the service time, I never cross-dressed at all. I mean, it's pretty hard to dress as a woman in a barracks full of men. That didn't go over too big. But when I got home, it came right back in spades. But fortunately, I met the love of my life, and we dated for several years during my college days, and we got married, and we had kids. During the time that I first got married, of course, working midnights at United Airlines, I can dress up anytime I wanted, because as I went in the door, she was going out the door, and I had the whole day to myself. But there was a point in time where I knew there was something wrong. Back in the old days, we didn't know anything. There goes computers, the internet. You find out a lot about that. So I guess about 10 years into the marriage, it was just mind-blowing. I really was very questionable about who the heck I was. And I told her. Very emotional for both of us, who blamed themselves and this and that. Anyway, it was the beginning of the end of my marriage, but it took 30 years for it to finally come to an end. About, 12 years ago, I finally left my house, and Barbara came out in spades, as you see her right now. When I told my children of what was happening, it was a nuclear explosion. I have 3 adult children. I have 7 grandchildren. My middle child, my son, hasn't spoken to me in about 8 years. And his 2 children don't even know I exist. The other 2, they know about it, they tolerate it, but in order to see them and my grandchildren, I have to go back into cross-dressing back as a man. These girls I wear are real, and it's very difficult to push them back down. In my apartment, I have all of my female clothes on one side, and then I have another closet with all my male clothes just to satisfy them. But it's something I need to do. I need them in my life. Like I said before, I'm the oldest one here. We all have difficulties. I've always said we're all the same, but we're different. There's not a trans person I know that doesn't have a story. Hopefully, real good stories, like just lady over here with her child, and that young man over there with his experience. That's a wonderful thing. But I don't have a family anymore. I have just people that I'm related to. It's difficult. It's heartbreaking. Setting that aside, I love who I am. This is who I should have been from the day I was born. But that's not the way it happens all the time. Each and every one of you are unique. You have your own story, whether you're cisgender, trans, gay, whatever. We all have our stories. And like I said before, and I truly, truly believe in that, every human being on this planet, all they need to do is have respect for the other person next to them. But that's not the way it is. And so we have to fight our battles, sometimes pick our battles. But in a situation like this, this is where you understand and where you learn. And I'm hoping with the things that I do, especially with Julie, the cisgender people know all about this stuff. The transgender people know about this stuff. The cisgender people don't. And now that you do, I'm hoping that it touches your heart, helps you to understand who we are, and maybe even say something to somebody else who's got something in their mind a lot different than you might, and say, no, that's not the way it is. We just want respect and know that we're the same as everyone else. We all have struggles no matter what. My bio that's in the pamphlet that you have is more than enough that you have to know about me. I'll accept any questions, like I said before, in these four walls. But after that, I go out the door, all bets are off. So again, I appreciate you being here. I'm grateful, and hopefully you'll keep the message and maybe even give it to somebody else. Thank you very much.
Can't decide if I want to sit or stand.
What's going to happen?
I don't know.
What's going to happen?
Wait, what? Okay, all right. Okay. My name is Charlie Arrowwood. I use they, them pronouns. I am, as Julie said, a parent of two. My kids are 3 and 5, and I am an attorney with a nonprofit that does name and gender marker changes for trans people and helps people get insurance coverage for transition-related care. Because some of you may or may not know, that is oftentimes not covered by insurance, so we have to fight with the insurance companies and people's employers to get that taken care of. Because it is medically necessary care, and as everyone, everyone's got a different journey and they have rules that don't make sense for the actual experiences of trans people, so we have to deal with that. So, as I was saying before, when I was a little kid, I was on the boys' soccer team. I was on the Big Birds because I wanted to be with my best friend Sam, and I quit because there was too much goose poop on the floor, on the grass. I don't know. But I played sports with boys, and then I was also a gymnast. And that was kind of the first inkling I had that I wasn't really I wasn't really a girl. I got to the point where I was like 12, 13 years old. My body was starting to develop, and we were required to wear leotards. So like just a bathing suit, basically. And I looked around, and I was like, nobody else has a problem being this naked in front of all these people, and nobody else had that problem, and so I was like, okay, maybe there's something going on here. I thought maybe it was because I was gay and everyone around me was a half-naked girl. But it took me a long time to sort that out. I started wearing 2 sports bras and a leotard under my clothes to go to school so that my chest was flat. I ran track, and I had the trainer put saran wrap around my chest so that I was flat. And my mom would say, "Why do you shmush?" And I was like, "'Cause I don't want boobs." So I came out as gay in like middle school, and as some of the other panelists have said, like it was kind of right, but it wasn't quite right. I didn't know that trans people were a thing until I was in college. I met the first binary trans person that I met. Like freshman year, and then I met a non-binary person. When I met the binary trans person, I was like, okay, this is like kind of right. It kind of makes sense to me, but it's not totally right. I knew I did not feel like a man. I had no desire to be a man or be, perceived as a man. I just knew that I was uneasy being perceived as female. There were parts of my body that made me uncomfortable. My voice wasn't, it didn't sound the way it was supposed to when it came out of my mouth. My face should have been a little bit squarer. I wanted scruff. But I met this non-binary person, and it occurred to me that just because I wasn't female did not necessarily mean I had to be a man. So I kind of started toying with the language around that and my expression a little bit more. It was only like 2 or 3, no, at this point it was like 4 years ago. I'm a senior seminar advisor at my Unitarian Universalist congregation, and the kids there start every class with name and pronouns. And when I first started experimenting with this stuff, I was like, yeah, he, him, or they, them, like whatever makes you the most comfortable. And so then these kids were like, no, if you like to use they, them, like just use they, them. And so I stopped using he, him. I was like, yeah, no, I'm not he. I don't want to use that. But it was like these teenagers who made it occur to me that I could set the terms for myself and that, you know, I didn't necessarily need to like acquiesce to whatever everyone else was comfortable with. And so it got a lot easier for me to just kind of be myself. After college, I went to law school, and after law school, I hadn't changed my name yet, and I was looking for a job for like 3 years. I was at a firm. I realized that wasn't really the setting that I wanted to be working in, so I left without anything lined up because I'm a fool. And my appearance has been this since high school, but I hadn't changed my name yet. I sounded very different, and so I was looking for jobs, and I would go on interviews in a suit, and I was qualified for these positions. It was entry-level attorney stuff, and I was once at an interview for a large auto insurer, and I walked in, and the woman looked at my resume, and she looked at me in my suit, and she said, "Are you sure?" And I said, "All right, forget it. I'm changing my name. This is not sustainable." I changed my name, and I actually immediately after that went to one of these at Shelter Rock with Julie, and I said, you know, I want to get more into this stuff. She said, I have the perfect person for you. She introduced me to my now executive director at my organization who was looking for someone on Long Island to do name change stuff. So that like kind of just happened perfectly, but it took me 3 years to find a job, and I didn't get one until I changed my name because you can't practice law as a name different than your legal name unless you have a court order, which then makes it your legal name. So there was that whole bit, and it has completely shifted every part of my life. This is what I do day in and day out, and I can't imagine having a quote-unquote normal job, like doing anything like in an office or whatever. But I went kind of like all over the place, but I also, I met my wife about 12 years ago. We've been together about 12 years, and we, as I was saying before, we were perceived as a gay couple for many years, and she has been completely supportive. She is watching the live feed and texting me, "So are you Riverhead?" I was like, "No, you know I'm not Riverhead, babe." Or Montauk, whatever. And, you know I'm not Montauk. But she, you know, I've kind of gone through this evolution with her over the past 12 years, and, you know, she's always there before I am. Like Alex was saying, like, she knew that something was up, and so, like, I would kind of, like, give her a little breadcrumbs, and she'd be like, yeah, like, cut your boobs off, it's good. She's like, I knew this was coming. She actually said, when I first, like, really used the vocabulary with her, she said, it's the logical conclusion to everything that you've experienced, and it was. And so she has been supportive there. She's been supportive with the hormone thing, and neither of us really identified as, like, strictly gay at any point, so it really kind of, like, we use queer because it just, like I was saying before, it's more about what we're not than what we are. It's more of kind of a fluid situation. And we have 2 children, a boy and a girl. My son is 5 and my daughter's 3. She'll be 4 on October 1st. And to the parenting thing, a lot of people ask, well, you use they, them pronouns. Why don't you use they, them pronouns for your children? Why aren't you raising them gender neutral? And as far as we were thinking, the fact that I'm trans and the fact that we're a queer couple and a queer family is going to complicate things for them to some degree. And so, statistically speaking, chances are they're cisgender. They're probably straight, or these days the kids are not necessarily, so maybe they won't be. But the kids, But so we didn't want to complicate things for them further, but our plan is to give them an open enough environment that if at some point they realize this is who I am or this is not who I am, they feel comfortable enough to come to us and share that with us so that we can support them in that way. But not to assume that it's going to happen by default, and same way every person's journey is different, every person's parenting journey is different, so I have a lot of friends who are from the get-go, getting X's on their kids' birth certificates and, using neutral pronouns, not sharing what genitals the child has, not having a gender reveal party. And so everyone's got a different plan, and I am curious to see how my children handle this the same way that my parents parented in a certain way, and, I pushed back a little bit. My family is very excited and supportive when when I was in the New York Times, that article was everywhere, but, we go to a pool party and I'm still she, her in my birth name, and I'm in everyone's phone as my birth name, which at this point, I'm picking my battles. I don't need that from them, so I just kind of roll with it, and I get what I need everywhere else in the world. And it's funny, my grandpa yells at everyone all the time when they call me the wrong name or misgender me. He goes, he wants to use they. I'm like, that's so close, Grandpa. But the spirit is there, his heart is there. So, yeah. My grandpa is the best ally ever. He was the one actually when I changed my name. He's a retired bored guy, so he's on the internet all the time. He looked up my bio at Transcend and saw that it was a different name and a different pronoun. And at a New Year's party with my entire family, he called me out and kind of broke the ice. And he was like, what's this new name and pronoun, whatever, what's they, them? And he knew that my mom would use him as a weapon to make me modify my behavior, let's say. So, Grandpa's gonna kill you if. And so he kind of took the wind out of her sails by having this conversation with me in public and showing her that he was supportive. And so it's kind of just been that for the past few years. I really haven't been at this very long. I kind of started using the terminology maybe 10 years ago, but I changed my name 3 years ago, started hormones 2.5 years ago, had top surgery 2.5 years ago. So I haven't been around that long, but, we're at the point where it's time for the family to get there, and they're not really getting there. But life is much more comfortable since. Despite complications and all that stuff, I am learning so much. I am meeting so many amazing people, this whole panel, and I love it. And I personally, you may hear different stories from everyone. I would not change who I am at all for the world. I grew up in the 5 towns, and I feel confident that I would be a crappier person if I was just one of my 5 towns people. But I've learned so much about empathy and understanding other people through my experience, and I know myself so much better than I would otherwise. So that's that.
So I'm last, and I hope I'll be pretty quick. So my name is Maria O'Leary. I am a regular wife and mom. I grew up on Long Island. In fact, I live in the house I grew up in. I wouldn't say that I like change. Not much of a change person. It took my husband 8 years to re-landscape the small little thing in front of our house when we inherited the home because I was attached and didn't like change. So we can infer from that that my husband is incredibly patient. We have 2 children. Our oldest is 21. His name is TJ. He's a cisgender male. He will be entering his senior year of college in a few weeks. He's artistic and empathetic and terrible with money, and we love him to death. He's our son. Our second child, Finnegan, is 18. He just got dropped off at SUNY New Paltz this past Thursday, so my husband and I are official empty nesters. He is a transgender male. He was assigned female at birth, spent his first 15-ish years living life as a girl. He's musical and smart and funny and incredibly grouchy when he wakes up in the morning, and we love him to death, and he's our second son. I got permission from Finnegan to tell his story because, as I said, it is his story to tell. I'll be using male pronouns throughout, even when I refer to him before transition. As mentioned, some children know very early, and they are very insistent and persistent and consistent with the articulation of the fact that they are not the gender that they were assigned at birth. In our case, it was a bit more subtle. When Finn was old enough to articulate an opinion, it was, no pink, mommy, no pink. So he loved Legos, and he was sporty, and he liked an athletic style of clothing, and we thought we had a tomboy. And off we went, raising our two awesome kids. Just a normal family on Long Island. When Finn was 13, 2 or 3 weeks before his 13th birthday, we got a call from his middle school. The counselor called to let me know that he was, a classmate had reported that they suspected that Finn was cutting his arms. So I got home from work and I went upstairs, and there was evidence of self-harm, and I asked Finn what was going on. He with a lot of anxiety and a lot of trepidation, said, Mom, I think I'm gay. And I said, okay, let's figure that out. So we got him an LGBTQ therapist. He saw that therapist for 6 or 8 months. It was really to help him process, his identity and who he was in terms of his sexual orientation. The cutting did not recur, and off we went to high school. And, my husband and I, back to raising our 2 kids. When Finn was 15, he decided to cut off the long hair that he had had his whole life. Cut it into a very short masculine style. My friend who cuts our hair is right here. She was the one who did it for us. And at that point in time, I asked if there was gender confusion. Now you may think, wow, that's evolved. Like I didn't really know anything about transgender at that time. But when you're a parent and you ask a question and you kind of think you know the answer to the question, or you kind of are hoping for a specific answer, and the way you ask it may not be really that effective, I think I said, there's no gender confusion here, is there? Oops. And he kind of rolled his eyes and said, no, Mom, I know I'm a girl. And that was that. Now, still, as we know, still waters run deep. There was internet searches going on, there was YouTube videos being watched, and Finn was, in his way, trying to figure out who he was. In his junior year of high school, he approached me in October, and he said, Mom, I think I'm a boy. So I said, okay, let's figure that out. We went and got a different LGBTQ specialist therapist, and he started to attend therapy. My husband and I thought that it was to work through gender confusion. Little did we know, there was no confusion. At this point, Finn knew he was a boy, and because he's such an awesome person, he was letting us down easy, sort of easing us into it. I think I'm a boy, trying to help us get somewhere where we could all embrace this as a family. Finn did not inherit my husband's patience, nor my fear of change. So 2 months later, I think it might have been January 2nd, Tim and I were just about to turn the light out, go to sleep. He came in our room and said, I am transgender. I am a boy. So we talked a little bit about it. Tim and I were kind of reeling. A week later, Finn came out on Facebook without warning us. And to say all hell broke loose in the house is probably an understatement. We weren't prepared. We had not told our inner circle anything that was going on with Finn. And here's this public Facebook post. We were outed, and we were blindsided, and we were angry about it. In retrospect, Finn did us a favor. He ripped that Band-Aid off. It was the right thing for him at the time, and it certainly wound up being the right thing for us. My husband and I talk about the train leaving the station. When it happened, he said to me, Maria, the train is leaving the station. We gotta get on. We gotta get on. So we got on the train and we started researching, internet researching, reading books, watching documentaries, attending a parent group, all in an effort that we would be able to confidently say, this was not a phase, it is not a fad, and it is certainly not a choice. This is who this kid is, this is who our son is, and we just needed as much information as we could get so that we could confidently say that and support him through high school. Now, going to high school is hard enough. Going to a Catholic high school as a transgender teen is fraught with peril. So my husband and I met with the principal and the school chaplain, and every day he went out to school and we held our breath and waited and hoped and prayed for graduation, which we made it to. This past May, he graduated from high school, and we had his graduation party on June 1st, first day of Pride Month. We knew he wouldn't want to decorate the house in school colors, so I asked, how about we do a rainbow theme? We asked everyone we invited to please wear pride rainbow colors, and everyone did, and we had an awesome celebration of Finn's accomplishment of coming out, living his life as his true self, graduating from high school and preparing to go to SUNY New Paltz, which is where we dropped him on Thursday, so we're just excited to see what's going to happen next. So that's our story.
So we're done, but now, do you have any questions before we wrap up? Yes.
Yeah, we were talking before about expression and gender expression. So I was, how you perceive people when you see them. So for you, Julie, I saw a cisgender female. So I was shocked when you said you're only in Valley Stream. I had you at like East Hampton. So I'm curious, what's your Montauk?
Well, my Montauk is everybody's Montauk in the metaphor. In other words, that would be where everything is accomplished. To give you just an idea, I had a very successful career as a cisgender heterosexual male in industry. I have an MBA, I have an engineering degree. And up until this past June, I have been, for the past 20 years, a trustee of a manufacturing union's benefit plan, health and welfare and pension. And this past June, I came out to them. So I have been, quarterly having to go to these meetings. As Barbara said, I have to cross-dress to go to these things. And they didn't know, which was great. But what really happened was we were able to pass what's called Gender. This past January, the governor signed the bill into law, which is the Transgender Civil Rights Bill. And so our lawyer for the union wrote to the union and said, hey, by the way, this law passed, and now you have to be aware of it. So I said, aha, this is the perfect time to come out. So effectively in June, I gave a similar presentation to the trustees and told them, our next meeting in September, you'll be meeting Julie. So for me, that's one more step, if you will, towards that transition. The other thing that I want to mention, and that's one of the reasons why it's so important to talk about Montauk for me specifically, is that within our own community, there are members of our community that want to either put themselves a little bit higher or push down other people. And there's this idea that, well, you're not trans if you haven't done A, B, C, D, E, whatever it is, or you're not trans if you don't get to Montauk. And that's not true. When you step on the train in Penn Station, except for parents that are willing to get on the train with you, you're on your transition, you're already there. You're gender expansive because you're heading towards Montauk. Whether you get off, whatever step you get off, it really doesn't matter. You're already on that train. So for me, one of the issues is, I am 66 years old. And other than some arthritic knees, my body is doing amazing things. It's still doing everything that it should be doing. I just gave blood last week, and they're like, oh my God, your blood pressure's perfect. Oh my God, you've got a lot of iron in your blood. Oh my God, like all kinds of good things. And as much as I would love to perhaps start on hormone therapy, the thing that holds me back is that A, my body is 66 years old. B, I am married to a cisgender heterosexual woman, okay? And C, everything's working like it's supposed to work. Do I want to mess that up? And how much time do I have left? And is it a crisis if I don't get to the proverbial Montauk? And so, yeah, maybe I'd like to take another stop or two, but I'm running out of stops. And I'm really just trying to figure out, okay, now, in this journey, what's really important? And I'm really happy with the way the body is working right now. It's healthy, it's doing all the right things. Do I want to mess with it? Is that next stop going to bring me that much joy? And I have to say, no, I don't think it really does. Yeah, maybe it'll soften my features a little bit or whatever, but again, as you said, and I appreciate the comment, when I go out, people don't look at me and go, I mean, there's like an occasion where I think I hear someone go, sir, but for the most part, I'm ma'amed all over the place. One of my happiest moments is if I'm in Stop and Shop and I see a mother with a child and the child does something funny or cute, and I can look at the mom and I can smile at her and I can smile at the child and the mother smiles back. If I was in male and I smiled at the mother or smiled at the child, most likely the mother would be like, okay, fine, we're getting out. Okay? And all I want to do is just be happy with the fact that that kid is really cute and really funny. Earlier in today's service, we saw some beautiful children and some funny kids, and it was just great to be around them. So my wife and I talk a lot about the sisterhood and so forth, and I don't need to go to another stop to be anything more than I really am. I feel good about what I am doing in life. I'm retired now and not retired. I mean, this is now my career. And my wife will tell you I'm working 7 days a week, probably 8 to 10 hours a day on various projects and things that we're doing. So I have found my calling. Would it be nice to go to another stop? Yes, it would be nice. But my question is there a payoff? Or am I better off really just saying, you know what, I can't do better than this, and this is really where I'm at. And so that's my journey. And others may have other journeys, but this is my journey. So I hope that helps a little bit. Okay, some other questions or things.
So I just want to start by saying how proud I am of you, Alex, for everything you've done so far and everything you've taught me. I've learned a lot from Alex throughout his journey and our journey together, but one thing I learned is the difference between being respectful and accepting and being an ally. Being accepting is a great first stop, and it's something that everyone should have and everyone should be towards everyone else. But when it comes to being an ally, it's really important to engage in affirmative behavior in order to be an ally towards the trans community. So for example, I'm cisgender. People see me on the street, they see me, they use she, her pronouns, and that's a privilege that I'm grateful for. It's not something that everyone gets. So for me, affirmative behavior is meeting someone, introducing myself to them as, hi, my name is Jasmine, pronouns are she, her, hers. And someone may stop and be like, whoa, wait, why is she saying that? Like, isn't that obvious? But it really opens people's eyes to realize, no, that shouldn't be an obvious thing. It should be something that's normalized. So it's really important to engage in affirmative behavior to make the world a more accepting place, no matter who you are and who you're coming in contact with.
I just wanted to thank you for doing the Montauk analogy. I work with a lot of trans youth, and I don't know that all of them are ready to get to Montauk, and I don't know that they realize there's so many stops along the way. And I think that needs to be communicated so wherever it is that they are, they're comfortable with it.
I work in a middle school and high school, and I have a number of students who this past year were transitioning. So I'm just curious, is there does your group go to schools and talk to students? Because one of the guidance counselors I know would be very interested in I'm sure she would be interested in having a group
Yeah,
come
we
to.
do it all the time. Yeah, I do it all the time. Julie goes all over the state. I mean, I can't go with her all over, but she goes way up into the North Country. I kind of stay down here. I've been in so many high schools, middle schools, and I'm a show and tell. Really. We're talking to young people that are, it's difficult to be a teenager, right, anyway, You throw the trans thing on top of that, or even the LGBT thing on top of that, and all hell breaks loose. Not every parent accepts their child to be different or what they expected to be. And it's traumatizing. This is why we get all these suicides. I always say, if your child is questioning or says, I'm transgender, like this young lady's child did, and I marvel, and I thank you, as I did before, and your husband. The only thing, the best thing, I won't say the only thing, the best thing to do is open your arms and just say, I love you, and we'll work this out together, just like they did. Perfect example. But when they're by themselves, and they're with their peers, and their peers don't particularly like who they are anymore, and you're changing names, and you're changing hairstyles, and you're changing clothes, I mean, this is monumental. This is really difficult. So I go in there, and I chit-chat. I mean, I don't go in there with a specific program, or I don't go through all of this. I'm just there, and they can ask me a million questions on what I did. And I've been through it all. I've been through every part of this thing. And by the way, I'm probably in East Hampton. So, I've done quite a bit. I've been around the block a few times. But yes, I personally will go to any high school, any middle school, to talk to students. I love talking to faculties because they're the ones that will support them. Because the Gay Alliance clubs that they do have, those teachers that are there, obviously they support them. But it's the other teachers, and they got their own ideas of what should be done. They need to come here. They need to come here and listen and understand where they're coming from. There is no transgender person that I know of that decided to be transgender. It doesn't happen that way. It may be difficult for them to understand. It was for me to know that they're transgender. But I didn't decide this. What I did decide is to survive. Because I always said there's a proverbial black box that people who are on the fringe of taking their lives, they put themselves into that box. And I always said, there's a doorway in that box, but you got to look for it. And sometimes you got to grab a hold of a hand to find it. That's what teachers are supposed to do. That's what you, as cisgender people, parents, friends, relatives, no matter what, that's what you're supposed to do. It's difficult. Why would we want to do this just to be on a street corner and get beat up? I mentioned today, or I will mention now, I'm the lead chairperson of the Long Island Transgender Day of Remembrance. We were here 2 years ago to honor those who were murdered during that past year. We broke records. It was like 26, if I believe. I think that's right. This year, November 17th, we are going to have another Transgender Day of Remembrance right here. And I would hope that every one of you will attend. Doesn't cost you a dime. Just come in here and listen. We are all here. We're alive. But there are people on this earth that are not alive now, only because of who they are, plain and simple. And so we honor those folks. This year, I think, is 13 known people of color, mostly, that have lost their lives because of who they are. So we're going to honor them. And during our particular program, we're going to have a keynote speaker. We will have 5 trans voices that will tell their experience in 5 minutes, one of which is our good friend over there. Alex will be here. And in fact, one mom, unfortunately not you, but you're on my list. So they will be there, and we'll have some performers here that will perform for you, and then we'll have a candlelight mentioning all the names of those victims, and hopefully we'll have the pictures to go on the overhead. So it's about an hour and a half, and like I said, it doesn't cost you anything, just come and be here. November 17th, 7 o'clock. You got the first thing, mark your calendar, please be here.
Okay. I just want to say something. I just want to go back a moment to your very gracious identity of Julie. The reason why Julie, and like I said, we're in different stages of our transition. I don't know if we ever stop or whatever it may be, or get to the point where we're happy. The point, the fact that what Julie and I and Barbara and everybody else who's transgender share is that we have confidence in ourselves. We exude that. That's how we go out. That's how we just navigate through life. Because I deserve to be anywhere I want to be. Sitting like Barbara's always said, Julie always said, and that's what gets us to be respected by the people that we interact with. That they call us ma'am and things like that. And it doesn't matter, have anything to do with where we are in our stops in life, but rather than who we believe we are and know we are. If you don't love yourself and accept yourself for who you are, then there'll always be a question about how you get out of the threshold of your home and to be your authentic self, so that those of us who have been able to do all these things, go to schools, I'm there every month in the city schools and in quite urban environments, speaking to a lot of different cultures and things like this, and have never been disrespected by any of the children. They ask very intense questions at times, but for the most part, they are so accepting. And I do also lecture to faculties, and they do need a lot of help. So do the doctors on Long Island. And we need the support of all the older generation, my generation, which don't have that accepting type of bone in their body. They see us different. And I often tell them, and what happens if your child was in a horrible, horrible accident or fire? Are you not going to love that child? Is that child all of a sudden strange to you? Do you not want that child in your life because he has some sort of infirmity? No, of course you're going to love that child. And I often tell you parents that you have 2 choices in life. Either love and accept your children, no matter what they are, trans, gay, anything, or you can mourn their death every single year by going to their grave sites, because that's what's going to happen with a 40% suicide rate. So it's time to open your hearts, open up your minds, and accept us. Accept your children. Accept your grandfathers, your uncles, your aunts, your sisters, your brothers, your neighbors, everybody, because we have a large transgender community on Long Island. Northwell Health, when we started our Trans Health Center, we were asked to have 45 names the first year. First year we had over 150. Now it's topping 500. So if you think this is a very small community, you're very, very much mistaken. And it's our time to hear our voice, and that's that. Here you go,
To Charlie.
A little lighter. Just back to the school thing, Pride for Youth is an LGBTQ youth services organization. There's an office in Belmore and one in Deer Park. And we do professional trainings in schools and other agency environments, offices, that kind of thing. And we also go into high school classes and talk to kids about understanding like sexual orientation and understanding gender and kind there are different conversations that happen in both of those settings, but that's also definitely, we're all over Long Island.
Right. And again, my card is in the back, and if you want to continue on email and so forth, please sign up. Any other questions? Oh, Alex, can you pass that down?
I just wanted to add too, because I forgot to add it during my presentation, but I'm extremely lucky to have support and encouragement and love from my family, my brother, my parents, my girlfriend, and if I did not have that, I am very serious when I say that I would not be here. And all it takes is one person standing in your corner. All it takes is one person holding your hand, telling you that you're valid, telling you that you're going to get through this, telling you that I accept you for who you are, and you don't have to hide anymore. And I wish I didn't have to say that I was lucky, because I wish that it was just a given for everybody to be accepting and understanding and supportive of people, no matter what their gender identity, expression, sexual orientation is, regardless of all of that. Because we are just like you. We're humans and we're people, and we deserve everything that you deserve. And just remember that your support and acceptance and encouragement can save a person's life.
Thank you. We're going to take another question.
I don't really have a question, I have a comment. And I want to thank you, because I think you all displayed courage, great courage, to not only be true to yourselves and all your loved ones, in your community, etc., by coming here today. And it reminds me of the struggles that we gay people went through 20, 30 years ago, where we were beaten up and we were assaulted for just being who we are. And I think that those days are coming to an end. I can see it here today, and I'm very proud of each of you. Thank you for sharing with us.
So any final questions? Oh, one in the back.
On the internet this week, I saw, I don't know what you would call it, a segment. And it was a transgender woman explaining the difference between how she was treated now as a woman and as a man. So have any of you had that experience?
Oh, treated like, I get doors opened, I get yes ma'am, no ma'am, thank you ma'am. People help me. No one would do that if I was a guy. I mean, it's kind of thrilling. I like it.
So do I. Yeah, I love it. I mean, this is who I really am. I mean, there's no two ways about it. Yeah, there's a major difference. I mean, I had a whole family. I got 3 kids, 7 grandchildren. I was very, very macho. Let me tell you, my kids wouldn't let me be any otherwise. That's why it was such a surprise and a nuclear explosion when I came out trans like this. And it's still a problem. None of them accept me for who I am. I can never go like this. They'd throw me out the door. Maybe my son that doesn't talk to me anymore, if he had a gun, he'd kill me. That's how much he hated me at that point. He still does. He hasn't spoken to me in 8 years. The general public, I get along pretty well. I mean, I go anywhere, all you ladies, wherever you want to go, including the ladies' room, I can go there with no problem. Thank God. I've never been challenged, never been questioned. Now, do people look at me a little queer? Yeah. I don't know why. I don't know what's in their head. I might be the most gorgeous looking woman they ever saw. I get compliments on my shoes. I can agree with that.
She has really good shoes. Yes.
My nails, my hair. I love it. This is who I am. But that I will never regret where I came from. Never. My 3 kids are on this earth. I can't think that they would not be here if it wasn't that I was a male. I'm part of that. It was my seed that made these kids. They don't think the same way I do, but that's another story. My 7 grandchildren, one of them is going to be president of the United States, maybe in 25 years. I hope so. The thing is, I don't regret anything. I've learned so much, and I've been on both sides of this coin. I had to work all my life, and I did what I needed to do. Coming out was the biggest question in my life, because I knew something was going to go wrong, and it did. So what does that mean? I had to be stronger than that other guy. I had to muster it all up. it didn't come without a cost. I lost a family. But still, between me and the good Lord, it's just the two of us, and that's the way I gotta go through life. Do I love who I am? Absolutely. I wouldn't want it any other way. Would I want to go back? No way. I'll do it for my family, for that 3, 4, 5 hours that I got to be with them on, holidays and that sort of thing. But you're going to deal with me, nose to nose, whatever that might be. And yeah, I'm happier now than I ever was.
I just want to share a small story. So to my grandchildren, who I got a chance to see for the first time in 4 years last October, I'm still grandpa. And they see me like this. It took a lot of years for my son to finally let me see them. So I take them, we go everywhere like this and things like that. So I took them to the park the last visit, and I'm swinging my little one on the swing. She's 5 years old. She's next to her little girlfriend, and she says to her girlfriend, "That's my grandpa." So the little girl looks at me, and she says, "That's your grandpa?" She said, "Yeah. He tapes his hair on in the morning and then goes out like that." That was cute. So I said, "You have to tell her all my secrets."
I had kind of the opposite experience because I was socialized as female, and now I am perceived as male. And so a few years ago, the American Bar Association came out with a rule that judges and attorneys cannot speak to female attorneys in a certain way because there were problems with harassment, discrimination, that kind of thing. And my father, who's an attorney, as this was coming out and being ratified, said, "Do you really think that's necessary?" And I said, "Have you ever practiced law in a courtroom as a woman?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Well, then you have no idea because I have heard some absolutely wild stuff." And I experienced it before I transitioned, even though I was in a suit every time I was in court. It was a very different experience walking in there as even a gay-looking, whatever that means, woman, than I have now walking in as someone who's perceived as male. The other thing, as Julie alluded to with the children, I don't see myself as a man, so I forget that everyone else does. And I'll be on the subway or I'll be, walking down the street and I'll see kids and I'll like smile or I'll say hi to them, whatever, and I have the opposite experience where people think like, "Oh, that's creepy." And that to me is like super upsetting because I am a parent at heart. I have 2 small kids, and when I'm not with them, like, I still behave like a parent. And
You still dunk your cookies.
I don't. No. Oh, I do dunk my cookies. I thought you said you don't give cookies. I was like, I wouldn't give cookies to kids even if I was a woman because it would be creepy. No, I do dunk my cookies because I am also a child. But I just, I bring my kids, I'm like in charge of the school stuff, and my son is registering he's starting kindergarten in a week and a half, and it's kind of because my wife works in the city and I'm more local. I'm responsible for bringing them to school and doing the play dates and activities and stuff, and I am often the only non-mom there, and it is a very interesting experience. And I think because I'm a little more, like I always say, I'm a Jewish mother at heart, and I'm a little more flamboyant maybe than most of the dads that are around. And so I think that people might think something's up, but I think they don't really know where to go with it. And I think that I fit in better with the moms than the dads. And I don't know, like it's just a weird, like, I'm definitely treated differently. And now, like, when guys, first of all, using the bathroom is, like, just a bonkers experience. But when guys, like, hold the door open for me and I say thank you, like, you just are supposed to grunt, apparently. Like, but I don't know.
It's only been 3 years.
Right, I have like almost 30 years of not knowing this, so I'm just learning. But I don't know.
What do your kids call you?
Good question. So when they were first born, they called me Ema, which is Hebrew for mom. I knew I didn't want to be an English word for mom because I knew already that I wasn't really comfortable with that. And as I kind of started transitioning and was no longer perceived as female, we've switched to Abba, which is Hebrew for dad. So unless you know Hebrew, you don't immediately understand that it's a mother or father word. And so my wife is mama or mom, and I'm Abba. And of course, because they learn everything in school and everyone is mom, dad, they come home and call me dad, which like drives me nuts. But I, again, pick my battles.
Thank you. I have a comment. I just think this is so important to hear for everybody, all ages. And I'm very grateful to this church. I've been here for many years. How it has helped me. My husband and I have 2 daughters. They're in their 40s now. And how it has helped me raise them to be as accepting individuals as they can be. Because they were exposed to a lot of different situations. And of course, as Pastor Ray mentioned, we had our first gay pastor in John Jeter in 1992. And my children were, I don't know how old they were, but they were not even in high school probably. But not only that, but just the conversations, the experiences, the things that you've been able to be involved in, activities, whatever, through this church and a venue. And this is what I see this being. And you going out to various places, it's the same kind of thing, really. It's exposing people to situations that they may not have an opportunity to be exposed to, and they just don't know about. And like you said, we're all people. We're all human beings. That's the basis of everything. And sometimes I think people lose sight of that, and they see the external, or they hear things, or you come from your own perspective, and it's very difficult to sometimes get out of that and you think you want to be open, but you still have your own feelings about things and maybe insecurities or lack of information, that type of thing. So I just want to thank you so much for all the opportunities that you provide in different venues and to different people and to different groups. I think it's just absolutely spectacular and awesome. Thank you.
Sorry, I had to test mics. Charlie, if I may ask you a question about your story. You talked about how your grandfather outed you at family gathering, which kind of sounded like not on your terms, and I was wondering what it looked like to you to like have that kind of conversation with your family if you had control over it.
I was actually really grateful for him for doing that because he knew, based on how the gay thing went years earlier, he knew that it was never going to happen unless someone made it happen. And so I was happy that he did that. And once it was out there, I had spent so much time thinking about how it would go that I was able to kind of take the reins back. So I did very much have control over it once it was out there. If I hadn't prepared for it and like kind of expected that it would be coming, I might have felt a little bit differently, but it was a favor to me in that particular context, and I'm happy he did it. And he knows that like everyone's going to listen to him, so like, and I knew I was confident that he had my back. So whatever their response was, I could have just gone to him and like he would have made sure that they were kind to me, at least. So it wouldn't have been so bad. But it went fine, and it's fine now. No one is thrilled. But my parents have their grandkids, that's all they care about.
Okay, any other questions? All right, this is the last call now because you walk out the door, things change. All right.
I just have one other comment. I have to thank you. Oh, yeah. I have to thank you all for sticking around.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a long one, right? Really, give yourself an applause. We do this all the time, and, you know, after 2 hours, I mean, people are fading away, they're sleeping, they can't wait to get out. But you all stood here, and I am amazed that you really kept it up. Thank you so much for doing that. Thank you. Don't forget November 17th, please.
Pastor Ray, thank you so much.
You're welcome. We were, after Sid's comment, we were going to stay here till 8, but I have to tell you, I still freeze and dunk ring dings. Because it's so easy. But Lorraine, the one who asked you that, when she's the only person in the audience who I have a concern when she gets the mic, because we're sitting here in talk back that we have after worship every Sunday, and we're having this conversation, and I'm here a little while, not too long, and she says, I have a question, okay? What if a gay man comes through the door and sits down and decides he wants to pick the hymns? I'm saying, I don't know. What do you mean? Well, what if he says, I'll take him and him and him? So I knew I was in the right place. And I know I'm in the right place tonight for a lot of reasons this afternoon. And I liked what was said all through this, especially the part about how other people impact our lives. We're part of the narrative. So there's people before us. There's people here now. That's our sort of call. And there will be people that will follow us, whose lives will be greatly improved because of what's happening here. And that's already the case. And to be part of that in such a vibrant and meaningful way I have much gratitude for all of you and for this congregation. And I'll just close with this. Is some of the things I've been a part of, I love it when they'll say, well, you know, we have to talk about the gay issue. And I will look at them and I will say, listen, I am not an issue. So please don't objectify me so that it's easier to manipulate me at arm's length. I'm here. The things you do and say, the laws you pass, the decisions you make impact this living, breathing human being and others. And you did that today. You impacted all of us. And thank you, Julie. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, everybody. We are blessed. It's been a mitzvah. Thank you.